Hello. Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me? Excellent. So my name is Kwame. I'm the Executive Medical Director of Humber Teaching NHS Foundation Trust, and I have the pleasure of opening this research conference. I stand on the shoulders of people who have worked tirelessly, including Catherine and the colleagues in the blue badge, polo t-shirts. When you become Executive Medical Director, you get colleagues who do the hard work and you take some of the glory. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping. We are not expecting any planned fire drill. So if there's fire, please, we would give you assistance. I think like the airlines would do. You go through these doors. Our research will be on social media as usual. So that's hashtag Humber Research 2025. You can log in and follow the research. So apart from those in the room, we have over 100. So there's 350 people who have signed into the conference. So there's 180 in the room. There's a lot more outside in the online. So hello to those online. I hope you can hear us. We will be taking some pictures as well. So if you're not happy to do that, let us know. So I am happy to say that this is our 8th research conference. And this event has grown over the years. And every time we advertise, it becomes a hot ticket, especially for the room. This is our chance to celebrate our community who have helped in participating in research. Our contribution to local, national, and international research from Humber. I believe that we punch above our weight for a medium-sized trust, and all the data shows that. This is a chance to collaborate with experts across the country, and importantly, showcase some of the research across our trust. I encourage you to ask questions, to connect with one another, and to enjoy the session throughout the day. I'll take this opportunity to welcome Catherine, who will chair the morning session. Catherine is a hard-working director of research in our trust. Thank you. Welcome to the stage, Catherine, and welcome everybody for attending. I'm sure there will be a few more people who will come through because of the traffic. Catherine.
Thank you. Just that. I'm not quite as tall as Kwame. Okay, well, I'm going to chair this morning's session. Unfortunately, Michelle isn't able to be with us yet, so she was going to help us chair, but I'm going to take over for now. And it's with great pleasure that our first speaker is Dr. William Bird, who was awarded an MBE in 2010 for his contribution to health and physical activity. But actually what his bibliography doesn't say is that in 2015, the BBC Wildlife magazine voted him in the top 30 most influential conservationists in the UK. And I like this one. The Independent on Sunday put him in the top 100 people to make Britain happy. And we all need a bit of happiness. So I'd like to welcome Dr. William Bird. Thank you.
So, Catherine, thank you very much indeed for the introduction and those little kind of snippets of my life. I've been a doctor for about 40 years now and a GP for 35 years. I think that's the thing that I kind of feel I'm still in there, and I absolutely love the job. Being here is also one of the things I absolutely love, just talking about experiences, what we're learning as we go through health and healthcare. And I have to say a big thank you to Catherine and Alison. They have been amazing, because you can always tell these conferences are hard, things to come in at the last minute. So I am going to hopefully, oops, what's happening here? Let's just check. Is that going to happen? Yeah. So I want to kind of look at things slightly differently. And the reason I'm going to do that is because we know that life expectancy has stalled since about 2012. And in fact, in the deprived areas, it's going backwards. We've even got infant mortality starting to rise again. So what is going on? We talk about evidence-based medicine. I'm a great fan of evidence-based medicine. And we do evidence-based medicine and evidence-based about obesity and about physical activity. But physical activity, I've been in that world for 30 years, and it's flatlined. Obesity is going the wrong direction. So how can we say we're doing evidence-based when everything's going in the wrong direction? I think we need to scratch our heads a little bit. And I think the one that you'll all be very familiar with is that as life expectancy stalls, the actual amount of healthy life is going down. So women in the most deprived areas now live less than 2/3 of their life with health. Over 1/3 of it is with the disease and disability. That's really shocking. You compare that to some of the even more third world countries that we call, and they have a tiny amount of disability. And yet we've got this big surge as we go through. So what is going on? We're pushing away at trying to do the right thing, and yet something isn't working. And I want to put this across, that we know with very strong evidence that people with chronic stress develop disease. We've known that for a long time, for the last 15 years anyway, 20 years. And I want to just sort of argue that I think this may be where things are going wrong. Now, new research has shown that when you don't have the safety around you, you will feel stressed. In other words, our default for any animal is to feel stressed. It's not to feel okay. The default in our settings is to feel stressed. And the only way we don't feel stressed is if you build safety around us and cocoon us in safety. So it's not the stressors that are causing the anxiety, because we live in a pretty safe world. Things are better than they've ever been. And yet we're more anxious. It's because the safety has fallen away from us. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. We have 3 big settings that we have to have, like every animal. And I do have to confess that we are animals. We're no different. We might be in our nice clothes and a nice room, bit of air conditioning, looking around, thinking we're not animals, we are animals. And we're set as animals, and we have to feel safe. We have to feel valued. Why? Because if you don't value yourself, you're not going to get the best mate, and you won't reproduce your genes. If you don't feel valued, your mother or father are going to push you away, and your brothers and sisters will get all the milk, all the attention. So we have to feel valued in order to keep ourselves safe. And we have to have a sense of belonging. And I see the little cards about recruiting for people for loneliness. That is going to come out strongly in what we're talking about. And if we don't have those things, then we go back to our default. And our default is feeling stressed. Okay? How many people, or how many of you, feel anxious all the time, but you've no idea what you're anxious about? That's because our brain has realized that some of our safety has fallen away. And when that happens, we get sympathetic nervous system. We know that adrenaline, noradrenaline come out. And it shifts away from the ventral vagus nerve, which does the repair and growth. So children who don't feel safe will have a lower height than children who feel safe. Their growth is stunted because their energy is all being directed towards the sympathetic fight and flight. Children, part of their brains will change as well. And all of us, when we're in this fight and flight, our growth and repair stops. The dorsal vagus is slightly new, is burnout, is a breakdown, as the old way used to be called. And that's a freeze or crisis. We no longer can run away from a problem. We can no longer fight the problem. It's been so overwhelming, or it's been going on for so long, that we just shrivel up and freeze. And that's what happens when we have burnout. And that takes a long time to sort out before our body feels safe enough to come out and get back to life. And just so you know, because it's a research conference, I'll put a little bit of brain up. The hypothalamus triggers off the adrenal gland directly to produce the adrenaline and noradrenaline. And then in the blood supply, you get ACTH coming through from the pituitary gland that goes to the other part of the adrenal gland to produce the cortisol. That comes about a few hours later. The adrenaline is immediate. And I'm not going to go through all the stress, the acute stress, because I'm not talking about acute stress. Acute stress is actually quite healthy. Apparently we need 7 episodes a day. Some of you in the NHS probably have a few more. But I don't know which researcher said 7 parts. We need a bit of stress to keep us going, to keep us motivated. We're talking about chronic stress. It's when there's continuous cortisol, blunting of the cortisol, the diurnal variation. So if we don't feel safe, we don't feel valued, and we feel alone, we are going to get anxiety and fear, even if there are no stressors around. And then that goes to chronic stress, and everything changes in the body. We are a new animal in chronic stress. And for children, we know about adverse childhood experiences. Now, those are the stressors. Not only do they don't feel safe, but they've also had some stresses as well. They have had both. And their brains will change. And actually 48% of all mental health in adults is thought to be due to ACEs from children, 48%, and almost half of drug addiction is thought to be from ACEs. So it really changes the brain. So let's have a look. Increased life expectancy is slowed, and we're particularly those in deprived areas where there's a lot of disability. Chronic stress could be one of the main factors. We're going to keep going on that. And it is our default setting. So it's not as though we need stresses, because otherwise people are scratching heads thinking, why are we anxious? And safety switches off that stress response, and it stimulates the release of hormones, and children are terribly vulnerable, really vulnerable. Now, here's a new theory coming up, and there's going to be a book published by Martin Pickard from Columbia University. And it's now been kind of validated by lots of other researchers that we've got a constraint of energy. Now, in most systems of energy, like machines, you just put more fuel in and you get more energy. But for the human, if we add more fuel of food, it still means that constraint, so that extra food just goes into fat. In other words, if we're stressed, our metabolism goes up, adrenaline, noradrenaline, heart rate goes up, all the cells are absolutely pumping away. Glucose is being flowing around the body, being used. And therefore the growth and repair from the ventral vagus nerve shrinks. What does that mean? What happens to a company when you stop doing maintenance? When you stop supporting the staff? What happens to a company? You say, well, that's the NHS. I don't know. What happens to a company when it's in real trouble? It will take away all those things and focus on the problem. So our bodies are the same. When we have chronic stress, the energy is taken away from growth and repair. So we start to get cells that are becoming more and more damaged, accumulate more and more toxins. Our growth disappears, I've mentioned about children, and we start to go into a decline. That's where that disability starts to creep in. It's that chronic stress is shrinking that amount of growth and repair. The next thing that happens is that we switch on lots of emotions. They're all protective. They're all really good for us to survive. That's why we're so successful animals, but we call them negative emotions, as though they're bad things we should throw away. But fear keeps us out of trouble. Anxiety also keeps us away from trouble. Loneliness means that we actually then don't go into danger with other people. Suspicion and lack of trust, anger, fight and flight, depression, sickness behavior, holding us all in. These have all got purpose. So fighting each one of them, yes, we can do a CBT, but they're trying to help you. So as soon as we get any of these, or any patient we've got these, or that really difficult patient we know, who seem to be constantly suspicious and angry with us, they don't feel safe. That's all. They don't feel safe, so they're trying to protect themselves. They're not aware of it, but that's what they're trying to do. So not only do our emotions and our cells now change, but also our behaviors change to try and protect us. Everything is trying to bring us back to safety the whole time. Sleep, you want to be vigilant. You don't want to be a hunter-gatherer and be really anxious in a very, very dangerous place and fall fast asleep because you're going to be eaten or you're going to be stabbed. So our sleep becomes lighter and more patchy. Our inactivity, why waste calories at the gym? Here's a man who's been pushing physical activity for 35 years. Because our body doesn't get it. Why waste energy when we've got to conserve every part? So our hypothalamus switches on things of ghrelin and others to demotivate us from exercise. So when we're stressed, we find it harder to go to the gym and to run. And patients who are struggling with everything in their life, and you do a physical activity program, good luck to you. It won't work. I can assure you, it will not work until you get them back into safety again. Poor diet. How many diet randomized controlled trials to get obesity sorted out have failed? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, because the body is screaming at someone to get as many calories in and deposit it as fat, because it wants to keep those calories for safety. The worst thing that can happen to an animal is starvation. That's what used to happen for the last million years. So we still haven't adapted out of that. So when we feel stressed and don't feel safe, we will crave, and the industry have caught on to that, and so they're producing all sorts of hyperpalatable foods, and all of those foods which are so dangerous to us because they're hitching on to vulnerable people who want to have high calories of sugar and fat. And addictions. So two things happen here. One of them is, if you're chronically stressed and anxious, it's a miserable place to be. It really is horrible. What do you want to do? Numb it. How do you numb it? It's drugs, alcohol, gambling for hope, everything you try and do to numb that horrible feeling. It's the only way you can get out of that feeling. But also, the frontal part of the brain is a very, very busy part of your body, using up lots of energy. You remember the energy constraint? What does the body do? It saves energy by shutting down the frontal part of the brain, which is using up vast amounts of energy. We don't actually need it to survive, but what it does, it stops the constraint of the amygdala and the other parts of the midbrain which do the danger. So now everything's more dangerous because we haven't got the frontal part of the brain to calibrate it all. We also, the frontal part of the brain is the best way of having inhibition. So you take away the frontal part of the brain and you become disinhibited. So suddenly all of those gambling things and all of those addiction things with the dopamine don't have any governor anymore, don't have any prefects around to tell you what to do. So all the dangerous behavior we see is because someone in chronic stress has shut down that frontal part of the brain to save energy, and they're trying to numb a pretty miserable experience. So we work on all of those and don't make people safe, they're going to fail. So these are all protective. Your body is really trying to help you, or the patient. The emotions, they're trying to help. The behaviors, they're trying to help. All of those things. The chronic stress is causing your cells to try and get back into energy again. So the impact of chronic stress is huge. It shifts the energy away from growth and repair, so your cells start to become less and less efficient. It takes it away from the frontal part of the brain as well. Interestingly, as you get older and the energy gets less, the other part of the body, which is using up lots of energy you don't really need, are muscles. So you get sarcopenia, your muscles start to shrivel, but only in people who have got chronic stress and who aren't using it as well. Grip strength is a really good way of measuring that chronic stress and heart disease and everything else like that. It reduces the frontal cortex, less concentration, less inhibition, less moderation of fear and anxiety. It changes those emotions. They're not really negative emotions. They are to this world. You don't want someone screaming and shouting at you. You don't want someone depressed. You don't want someone who's constant anxiety. But they've all got a very good reason why they're there. Certain behaviors are activated. We conserve calories, diet, physical activity, sleep, the big things we talk about, which are really important. I'm not saying they're not important. I'm just saying they're not going to change much unless we start to get people back to safety and our sleep quality changes. So now we've got this feeling unsafe to chronic stress, to negative emotions, unhealthy behaviors, and then that has a direct effect of laying down fat in your visceral fat. Where do you want to have fat when you're a hunter-gatherer? Well, you don't want it in your legs because you can't run fast. You don't want it in your arms because you can't throw a spear. There's no room around the head, so the only place left is your tummy. What a good place to have it. So you have a little pouch of energy, and you keep that for the winter, until it disappears. We keep it the whole time. And as we put more and more fat down, it becomes more inflammatory and a problem coming through. And our gut biome also changes. Chronic stress makes you have a leaky gut. So all that ultra-processed food you're taking in now not only damages the gut, you've also got chronic stress damaging the gut. So you've got two things now damaging the gut, which create more problems of chronic inflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction. And these two books here say about chronic inflammation being, this one, Inflamed Mind, the cause of most psychiatric diseases, and the brain energy is saying that mitochondrial damage is cause of most psychiatric diseases, and the two are actually connected together. I am not going to go into the mitochondria. It'll be unfortunate, I've only got 15 minutes. I'd speak for an hour on little mitochondria. Little tiny cells that used to be bacteria. 1 billion years ago, they joined together to another bacteria, and they created life, and we're still full of them. Each cell has about 300 to 1,000. And then we've got a lot of cells, and they move around, and they're quite independent. They have their own DNA, which some of you will know be passed on by the mother only, because the mitochondria is in the tail of the sperm, so it gets dropped off. So you have this mitochondrial Eve, you remember, going all the way back. The mitochondria think differently. They switch your cells on and off. They tell your cells when to die. They switch on your immune system when they're needed. They communicate with each other all around the body. They're independent, almost, little bacteria that still live around you. And if we don't look after them, we really, really suffer. And when you give them too much energy of glucose and fatty acids, they get choked up and they start to produce lots of ROS, reactive oxidative species, which is like exhaust coming out, lots of smoke in a car. And that causes all sorts of damage. So all of that thing is now causing your immune system to fight you, and mitochondria going worse and worse. Your little pets, you're not looking after your little pet mitochondria. Remember that. That's the only thing you remember today, is your little pets. There are quite a few of them. And some people have already said it's mitochondrial dysfunction, the one thing that links all chronic disease, non-communicable disease, because they're beginning to think it is. It's absolutely universal across. So we've got all of that causing disease. So that's a pretty good pathway. So what can we do about it? Well, I'm going to introduce in a minute health creation. Let's just do a quick summary. Chronic disease leads to constant release of cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline, catecholamines, and ghrelin that increases appetite and reduces the motivation to exercise. Okay, so that's normal if you don't want to exercise. They ensure that there's plenty of energy around. So glucose levels go up, insulin resistance goes up. Why? Because you want to have as much sugar as possible circulating around your blood. Interesting, isn't it, why diabetes is going up and up and up? Could be a very strong cause. Unused free fatty acids, because they're really good at energy. They're really efficient from a mitochondria to convert those energy. But if you've got too many of them, they choke the whole system, and then they get deposited in your heart and your liver and everywhere else, and you get fatty liver and fatty heart, and you get visceral fat. And they damage the mitochondria, and damage of mitochondria, and the visceral fat, and the poor sleep, and the inactivity, and the poor diet all lead to chronic inflammation, where the immune system attacks us, and all of that leads to the mitochondria stopping working, which causes possibly all chronic disease. So we're starting to see a picture which may be different to what we've been trying to do. Health creation is one way of looking at it. It's a process through which individuals and communities gain a sense of purpose, hope, mastery, and control over their lives and immediate environment. When this happens, their health and well-being are enhanced. Okay, so it's a way of actually empowering people to look after their health and understand it. And it's starting to look a little bit more, if we look at here, that the safe, value, and belong that we started with is above what we're used to doing in prevention, which is sleep, physical activity, diet, smoking, alcohol, which are all important, but they're failing. We're failing for some reason. And I argue it's because we're not doing the top bit. The medical prevention, all the stuff in the NHS we're used to, is a bit further down. Again, that's important, and it needs to rely on the bit above, which needs to rely, I say, on the bit above. And then we come to the treatment. And we need to do all of those, all of them, but we need to not forget that the top one, I argue, is probably the most important and possibly the more difficult for us because we're not trained into this so well. We're trained into this by giving lots of statins and ACE inhibitors. And these poor old people, and I'm saying that not in a derogatory way, but they're, how many patients you've got there, if you've got clinical knowledge, they don't even know what their tablets are for. They're going through and they're going to the pharmacy, and their whole life is about worrying about their medication and the appointments they've got to do at the NHS. And it becomes the sole purpose of their life. Is that really what we want? And I'd even say it's worse. We talk about don't do this, don't eat that, don't do this, smoking might do that, or might do, well, we know smoking does that, it's not a good example. But all sorts of things that we're worrying about not to do this, because we're running away from disease and death. We look as though we're being chased by this horrible impending doom of disease and death. And we've got to do this, we've got to do that, we've got to take this, we've got to do that. And we're running and running and running and running. But where are we heading to? Where are we going? Prevention is now just running away. It's not actually going anywhere. Nice little example of health creation as a destiny where you feel safe, where you feel valued, where you feel you belong, which, if you've heard about the blue zones, is all about people feeling with the family, people feeling content, people feeling they're living a life where they're enjoying it, there's laughter, there's fun. That's where health sits, not in that. So there are three other domains. How long have I got? I'm okay. There are three other domains: people, place, and purpose. So the people around us, the place around us, and our purpose. So if you add them together towards safe, valued, and belong, you get a 9-box area. And let's just quickly look at them, because I believe this is really the area where health starts. I'm not saying we stop doing the statins and we stop doing all of the other things, but hopefully they become less and less of a focus of a patient and more of a little bit of extra they have to do. But this is, I think, where the focus should be. And unfortunately in the NHS, we're not really trained in all of this, so we have to work with partners who are trained in it. And we have to do much, much better. And hopefully, I've been involved a bit with neighbourhood health, we might see that starting to shift, where we have to be a little bit more humble in the NHS and accept that other people have the answers and we don't. So the first thing is probably the most important, is people feel safe with other people. So for a child, it's in a family. For an employee in the NHS, it's in their workplace. You feel that safety. You've got love around you. That, if you read the Good Life book, is the single most important thing on health. So life expectancy and connections to people are the strongest correlation, far more important than smoking, alcohol, and diet and physical activity. So there have been those studies that have been shown from a longitudinal study of the Harvard. Value, respect, listening, understanding. I stopped doing consultations as a GP about 15 years ago, and I'm so much happier because I'm now having conversations with patients. And conversation is great because we work on it together. Okay, what's your problem? Okay, how are we going to sort this out? What do you think we should be doing? How do we do that? Well, I'm a doctor, so I know about 10 or 20% of your problems. You know about 80% of your problems, and you've got 80% of the solution. I've got about 10 or 20% of the solution. Now, there's some things where I've got 100% of the solution because I can give antibiotics or I can give something. But for the majority of cases in general practice, it's a conversation we have to work out, and they feel valued, and they feel trusted, and they feel equal, and they feel listened to. That's how we should be doing it. I'm not saying I'm any better than anyone else. I just felt the consultation was a power shift. And we should be, and I so much enjoy it now, a bit more than before. Belonging to a community, clearly all fits there. Having autonomy, power, and hope. We're not very good at giving people hope. Now we have to be guarded by prognosis and things. But let's be a bit more energetic and excited and optimistic and give that patient hope. Let's give them that control as well. And then their purpose, they'll feel safe because they've got more control over it. And the values, and I'm going to go through these let's go through these. But what I won't be doing in a minute is that middle one, which is the central part where you feel really fulfilled, you feel creative, because all your growth and repair now is back into vogue. All that chronic stress has faded because your safety is now being pulled up, and that fulfillment and creativity, which everyone should have, starts to blossom. So you get all of those structures around you, and that middle one will start to work. So let's quickly go through those and how we can do those with ourselves. So love, trust, friends, family, these are the absolute building blocks of health. And those big studies, and there have been lots of cohort studies going on for some of them up to 70 years. And they've all shown that it's this that is the most important for life expectancy. That valued about conversations, respect, heard, understood, and ignored, patronised, belittled, bullied. These are things that we know about are the wrong. I feel I belong, about the community. A lot of that's about culture as well, respecting the culture and groups, isolated, outsider. And you look at the social media, which of course we have to mention, the empty connections. They're almost like empty calorie food. You eat it and it tastes nice to start with, but actually there are no calories in it really. All the calories have got nothing in it and they just simply cause more harm to you. And the same with some connections on social media, they're empty. They don't have any value. They're there and they make us feel as though they've got value, but they're empty. And it's those, and feeling counsel. So this is where we're starting to really struggle. In control and optimistic is about that autonomy, giving people and patients independence and giving them hope where possible. That whole thing about value and culture and spirituality we often forget about so much, that is another big, huge amount. The Blue Zone has found that religion added 12 years to people's life expectancy. 12 years, it was the biggest. Now, we always think sometimes some of you may be very spiritual and religious, some of you not at all, some of you might think it's more harmful. I think in general there's a mix of everything, but those who love it, we encourage it because it seems to be a way of working. Having that safe neighbourhood, having that psychological safety in an organisation, having a low trust organisation to a high trust organisation increases productivity by 25%. What is the NHS? Is it a low trust organisation? Can you actually say what you like and feel valued? Or do you worry about what you're going to say if you criticise? It's an important aspect because it's going to be really important for how much productivity we do and how good we are. The resonation of a place, connection to nature. Look at this. 2 areas, one in Berlin, in the woodland, in the street, a walk done on them. And they looked at the brains of students who walked in nature and walked in a park. The amygdala, which is the fear part, shrank in the area where they went to nature in 60 minutes. So imagine a child bringing up in an area with no nature, their amygdala is going to get bigger and bigger, and they'll have that for the rest of their life. Nature is really important. It's one of my areas there, but I'm not going to touch it. And then that whole culture of traditions and areas. Now, we just went through can I be 2 minutes? I've just seen what I got. I'm Chief Executive of Intelligent Health, and we do something called Beat the Street. And we've done it to 2 million people. And these are the questions we've asked. You can't see them all, you don't need to see them all. But we talk about trust, we talk about control of life. These are the areas we've gone to. And we collect this data as we go through. And we actually increase physical activity a lot, and we reduce inactivity, particularly those of disabled, long-term conditions, those who people who feel less safe, because we have thousands and thousands of people outdoors all doing the same thing. And we can map out down to street level where people are not feeling safe and where their anxiety and health creation is at its lowest. which means we can go there. Look at this. This is the lowest part in Ipswich of the health creation. That's the dark blue. That is inactivity of adults. But look at inactivity of children, the yellow. It wraps around where adults aren't feeling safe. So where adults don't feel safe, they hold their children together, stop them becoming active. So there's a real strong, if you look at ONS, the opposite ONS4, which is the anxiety one, it doesn't actually show any correlation whatsoever. So I think we're onto something different. So lastly, going to quickly go through people in deprivation. It's a place that's a problem. Everything else is pretty okay. They just hate the place they live in, and that's causing constant stress. People of physical activity, it's universal all the way through. It goes through with our theory that the orange dot is those who are inactive, and the blue dot is those who are active. If you look at diabetes, it's pretty much through, but there's this constant pull of people trying to get back to safety between the gaps, between the orange and the who've got diabetes and those who are blue who haven't, particularly on control. People with mental health, it's even wider now. They're desperately trying to get back to safety, and they're drifting further and further apart. And women in the most deprived areas with long-term conditions, it's even further apart. So you imagine their bodies are screaming to try and bring them to safety, so they're not having any repair or growth, and they're getting more and more into disability. And actually just doing to beat the street, we shift people across just by getting people outdoors, talking to each other, and trust is the one that goes up the most. So we're one of the safest countries. A third of people feel less safe, but look at our anxiety and mental health. We're one of the second highest. So we've got a real job to do to try and create this. And I'd say start with pregnancy in the early years, because we know that that will set the scene for the rest of people's lives. ACEs, as I said, 48%. Build those social connections, work with other organisations to do that, and connect patients to the outdoors and make them sure. I'm chairing this good in the West Midlands Combined Authority. We're hoping to make the whole region an outdoor region where the outdoors becomes a focus for community and place to be where people feel safer. And that will be something which you need to watch and see how it happens. And then that's what I think we can do in the NHS. So I'm going to leave that. You can take a photo, and then I'm going to ask Catherine to end. End me. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks very much.
Thank you, William. That was brilliant. I didn't want to end him because I think it sets us up so well for all the talks for the rest of the day, because I was sat there thinking, everything that you've mentioned fits with everybody's talks today, so wonderful. We have gone over slightly, but I'm going to allow a couple of questions because I think this is really important. So if anybody's got any questions. Did somebody put...
I can hear you, and I'll repeat the question.
I'll speak up. That was great, lovely, thank you. My name's Louise. I'm a speech. Oh, yes, we're on. I'm a speech and language therapist in the organisation. I've got two questions, if that's all right. My research is about social participation outcomes for stroke survivors living in coastal and rural communities. And just thinking about what you said, the people that I work with often have a very sudden change in feeling safe, feeling valued because of their stroke. So maybe these were people that were living very fulfilling lives before their stroke, and because that happens, it changes literally overnight. So I wondered if you had any experience of that kind of scenario, and if it's not kind of a chronic situation, it's a very, very sudden thing, what the impact of that is. And the other question is about the 10-year plan, so thinking about sickness to prevention and clinic to community. This is very much kind of what you were talking about, so I wondered if you had any radical thoughts about what needs to change within the NHS to make that really work.
2 questions, I think, will be the entire conference, actually. I think that's so I'll very quickly. So the last one is sickness to prevention and hospital community. Absolutely right. Of course it's right. And when I talk about prevention, we have to do prevention more than treatment, but we've also got to be careful that prevention doesn't become an anxiety thing at which, because everything about prevention is focused on disease. If you get 100% prevention, what are you left with? No disease, but no positives. You've taken away the negatives, but you haven't created any positives. So I argue that prevention and then health creation. So disease, prevention, and health creation. All 3 are needed, not just the 2. And the stroke, there's a great story, 30 seconds story. Poor Catherine, she's starting really badly. I'm stressing you out. You've had one of your stresses already today. Is that this guy who had a stroke, and he had a stroke. This is before CT scans came out, and it was a devastating stroke. Hemiparesis completely down, hemiplegia, and 6 weeks of rehab in New York hospitals, best in the world, didn't do any good at all. So his 2 sons, one a neuroscientist, another a medical student, took him home, and they did an experiment on him. And they said, "Dad, you've got to do everything. We absolutely love you, but we're not going to help you." And over the 2 years that they had him, he was crawling, he was struggling, neighbours were phoning up equivalent of social services, saying, "What are these 2 sons doing to this poor bloke?" Anyway, he was skiing within 3 years. And when they did the autopsy at the end, when he finally died, they found that stroke area was completely dead, nothing had changed on that stroke area, but all the cells around had adapted and taken over, as you well know. But the love he had and that security helped him with that growth and repair. And if we treat the patient as a patient too much, we can actually then take away that autonomy, that growth and repair, and more hopelessness. Whereas if we actually put them back into the community as much as possible, and you're nodding your head, which you were saying, so that would be my take in that, yes, it's devastating, absolutely devastating, but let's give the hope, let's give the love, word we don't use very often in the NHS, and let's give that community support again.
Okay. The last question. Go on, Jean.
I just wanted to say, I loved everything you said. And I loved everything you said. And what I am so relieved and happy about is my husband is 80 years old in April. He has cerebral palsy and he's still bloody walking. Hey! You are.
I think a round of applause.
Okay, William will be around, so if you've got burning questions, I mean, we could talk all morning. I'm really sorry, but I am going to end you now. Okay, if I could invite Anthony Hurd up. Yep. Thank you. So this follows on nicely and gives us a bit of the local context. Anthony is the programme manager for the Growing Green and Blue Health at Hey Smile Foundation, and Humber Trust has been very much involved with this. So I thought it was nice to follow with some of the more localised contextual stuff. So thank you, Anthony. And just a reminder, on your tables there is the details for Wi-Fi if anybody's wanting to tweet and or X and all of that stuff. So thank you, Anthony.
Excellent. So yeah, thank you to Catherine and the team for inviting us to speak today. I've got the logos up there. So as Catherine said, we've been very much working in partnership with Humber Teaching NHS Foundation Trusts, with Dr. Hannah Armitt, who's been our clinical lead for this work, very much supported by the Humber and North Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership. And as you can see from the bottom, we are a charity, so we do rely on external funding coming in. So we've had national funding through the partners you can see on the left-hand side there, and local funding through Help for Health and the National Lotteries Community Fund. And I'm going to be talking today about exploring nature's impact on health and what we've seen and learned through our Growing Green and Blue Health project. So I'm going to cover who we are and what we mean by green and blue health, learning from our work with social prescribers and mental health teams, learning from our work with community organisations, and touch on the work we're doing across the region to grow green and blue health opportunities. So, as Hey Smile Foundation, we're the commission provider for voluntary community and social enterprise infrastructure support in the East Riding. So we basically help and support charities, groups, organisations to thrive. We're the place-based representative for East Yorkshire on the Health and Care Partnerships VCSE Collaborative, so building that link between the voluntary sector and the healthcare sector. And in a similar vein, we represent the VCSE on the East Riding Health and Wellbeing Board. But the reason I'm here today is because we were the lead provider for the Humber and North Yorkshire Green Social Prescribing Test and Learn programme. And it's great to have Dr. William Bird here today because he's been an absolute advocate, supporter, inspiration for that work that we've been doing. So, when we talk about green health, we mean activities that take place outside in parks, gardens, nature reserves, woodlands, and other green spaces. And that could be walking, it could be gardening, it could be habitat creation, sort of bushcraft activities, as we can see in the photo there. And when we talk about blue health, we're talking about activities on, in, or near the water. So Humber and North Yorkshire is amazing. So kayaking opportunities, stand-up paddleboarding, surfing in Scarborough, lots of opportunities. I'm also going to be talking about green social prescribing. So that's essentially, services like social prescribers and allied professionals connecting people with these community-based activities that take place in the outdoors and nature. So, the first area of work I'd want to cover was delivered as part of the National Preventing and Tackling Mental Ill Health Through Green Social Prescribing programme. And Humber and North Yorkshire were one of just 7 sites in England who received funding to explore how green social prescribing could improve mental health outcomes, help to reduce health inequalities, reduce demand on health and social care systems, but also look at developing best practice in making these green social activities more accessible and resilient. So, to build the evidence base of the benefits of using green social prescribing to support mental health, we partnered with Humber Teaching NHS Foundation Trust and Dr. Hannah Armit and developed a service evaluation that followed people on their green social prescribing journey. So working with different referral organisations across the region, individuals were recruited who were already accessing a service, predominantly social prescribing, but we worked with mental health teams and occupational therapy teams, aged over 18, and looking for support for mild to moderate mental ill health. The referral organisations not only recruited the individuals for us, but they also collected important data on who, how and why people were accessing green social prescribing and what they went on to do for how long and the impact it had on their mental well-being. We used the ONS4 outcome measure, so that's 4 questions that looks at happiness, life satisfaction, feeling life is worthwhile and anxiety. But we also used HADS, the Hospital Anxiety and Depression Scale. So, a cohort of 171 people were followed from accessing a service to up to 12 weeks of activity. And the cohort was made up predominantly of females, 59%, 39% male, 2% non-binary. And we found that 87% of participants were aged between 18 and 64. So they were actually of working age. 44% were either unemployed or unable to work due to ill health or disability, and 45% of participants live in the top 20% most deprived areas in England. So we were working across the whole of Humber and North Yorkshire, Grimsby, Hull, Scarborough, places like that. So the participants were referred to activity based on the What Matters to Me conversation, which is routinely used in social prescribing. So that means a wide range of activities were accessed. Nearly half took part in gardening activities, nearly a quarter took part in walking groups, but people accessed care farming, people took part in wilderness activities and took part in conservation activities such as habitat management. And working with the University of York, who did the analysis of the data that was collected by the services, we were able to show that 67% saw improvements in their overall well-being using that ONS4 measure, 70% saw improvements in overall anxiety, and 62% saw improvements in overall depression. And the University of York were able to show that that was statistically significant. So really good for us to show the role of community-based outdoor and in-nature activity to support health and well-being. This has been published in a lot more detail than I'm covering today, so it is in the Journal of Health and Social Care in the Community. So our data from here at Humber and North Yorkshire got pulled together with all the data from the rest of the test and learn sites across England, and it showed a similar thing. So the graph here, what you can see is the grey is the national average for the 4 ONS4 questions. The light green is responses from around 8,000 people. The light green is baseline, so you can see that people going into green social prescribing across the programmes in England were very much below the national average on happiness, life satisfaction, feeling life is worthwhile, and anxiety. But after the intervention, they had moved up to near on the national average. So again, really, really good outcomes. So it was not only the numbers that we used to show the impact of green social prescribing, it was also the stories and insights from participants. So this is just 3 individuals. So being with the horses made me feel closer to nature, calmer, and has helped me with both confidence and assertiveness. It's more therapeutic doing things outside, and my depression is now on a more even keel. I have strategies in place when I'm at home, and now tend my own garden to relax myself and remain calm. So following the 2-year test and learn programme, the national team secured extra funding to extend the work, and we chose to work directly with community groups supporting migrant, refugee and asylum seeking communities here in Hull and in York. And what we wanted to do was explore how we can support the community groups to demonstrate the impacts they are having through delivering green social prescribing activities, and particularly for those that are supporting communities suffering the most health inequalities and who aren't perhaps coming through social prescribing and other services. So we were able to give a collaborative of 6 organisations, and you can see the logos down there in the corner, funding to deliver activities. We didn't just want the nice stuff. We got them to cost out how much it would cost them to do the data collection for us, because we know it takes time, it takes resource. And then working again with Dr. Hannah Armitt and Hull and York Medical School, we were able to offer training and support in quantitative data collection for the groups so they could do it themselves. Hannah also conducted qualitative interviews to really look at why were people choosing these green activities and what was the role of self and community referral in their engagement. So we used ONS4 again. It was a requirement of our national funding to use ONS4, but we didn't get the kind of really nice, clear graphs we wanted to see that we saw with our previous work when working with statutory services. But we have taken a lot of learning in terms of using standardised outcome measures, particularly with grassroots community groups and those groups supporting our global majority communities. So as the graph shows, we actually saw a decrease in all scores after 3 months. So the blue is baseline, the orange is 3 months, and then that did increase again after 6 months. And we had discussions with our sort of academic partners, and we do sometimes see that, but we also took a lot of learning from the community groups themselves. So they talked about the wording of questions. ONS4 asks about what happened yesterday. So they could be in an amazing setting doing an amazing activity, but actually they've had a pretty bad day yesterday, and that's what they reflect on. We were working with individuals from across the world, and global events were having an impact on mental health and well-being. There was something around relationship building in terms of people being more comfortable over time talking about their mental health and answering the questions. Being in an outdoor space and really having the time to reflect about mental health and well-being we thought was perhaps a reason for seeing these changes. English was sometimes second or even third language, and we were delivering ONS4. We could only find it in Urdu, and Urdu wasn't a language that we needed here in Hull and York. And also, the communities were not being used to being asked about their mental health and well-being. We did a lot of work with the groups to build their confidence in being able to do that. So again, it wasn't just the numbers. So we also did some qualitative interviews, and Hannah met with participants and community leads. And through those discussions, 3 main themes emerged. So community organisations were seen as the trusted provider of social, practical and emotional support. So if individuals are seeing the community group that they trust delivering an outdoor and in-nature activity, it gives them kind of motivation to get involved. Interestingly, through the conversations, green social prescribing activity was seen as providing a link to heritage and culture, and maybe their country of birth and other aspects of how they engaged with the environment from the country that they have come from. And then, of course, green space and green social prescribing activity provides opportunities to improve health and well-being. So people were talking about, being out in the open and not just stuck in the same 4 walls. So, alongside this work to evidence the impact of green social prescribing on communities, we've also been working with a wide range of partners and groups and organisations to help build the capacity of nature-based opportunities in the region. And again, this is based around the findings from the National Green Social Prescribing Programme, which concluded that it's necessary to grow and develop nature-based providers to ensure there are a wide range of appropriate, diverse, geographically spread green social prescribing opportunities. So one of the main things we've been doing is offering training. So we've worked with Care Plus Group and Faraway CIC, who are based over in Grimsby, and we've done neurodiversity in the outdoors training. So they're a neurodiversity-led organisation and service, and we met with different groups and organisations to see how they can make the outdoors and nature more open for neurodivergent individuals. We've done the same with dementia. So Dementia Adventure are an amazing national charity who purely focus on outdoors and nature for people living with dementia, and are real advocates and will challenge any barrier that's in the way to get people outside and in nature. So we've worked with NHS teams alongside providers of activity. One of my favourites is we've been doing nature connectedness training. So we've worked with Catkins Outdoor Learning and Adventures for the Soul. And this is a really simple premise that the work of Derby University and the Nature Connectedness Research Group tells us that being out in nature is good, but being connected with nature is even better. So we've been working with groups and organisations to give them sort of really straightforward skills to bring nature connectedness into whatever it is they do, wherever it is they are, or whoever it is they're working with. So hugging trees, doing artwork on the beach there in Hornsey, and doing really basic bushcraft as well. We've also done experience days for NHS staff, so got teams and services out into nature, experiencing activities that go on, that they could connect people with. And we've done that in partnership with the North York Moors National Park, with Natural England, but also sort of local providers as well. So that's Frith Farm in Beverley, which is a community interest company and has an amazing kind of growing setup. And I kind of wanted to finish as saying, as a charity, the work we've been able to do wouldn't have been possible without the strong support of partners. So particularly Humber Teaching NHS Foundation Trust, our local voluntary and community sector, academics. So we've worked with York St John and Hull and York Medical School, alongside staff working on the ground, delivering services such as social prescribing and mental health support. And these partnerships do continue to evolve and new projects initiated. So it is great to see Humber Teaching NHS Foundation Trust taking part in research around conifers, looking at how nature-based interventions can support children with ADHD, and also Finch, so exploring how forest school type activities could support well-being within the school environment. So do go and check out the displays over there. We've also worked with York St John University to evaluate how upskilling community leaders gives them the knowledge, skills and confidence to be champions of nature and health within their communities. I've just started a piece of work with the national parks up in North Yorkshire. So we're training health and care professionals to use the RSPB's nature prescriptions, alongside exploring how our protected landscapes can be maximised as a resource to deliver health and well-being for our communities. And we're just starting a piece of work led by York University as a team science partnership, which is bringing together ecologists, healthcare professionals, academics, community organisations and those with lived experience to explore how nature interventions can deliver outcomes, not just for people, but for nature as well. So yeah, hopefully that's given you a whistle-stop tour of some of the things that we're doing. There may be a bit of time for questions, I'm not sure, but otherwise it would be great to have a chat kind of on breaks over lunch. Excellent, thank you.
Anthony. That was brilliant. We are running a few minutes late. I'm a terrible chair, but that's it would be unfair not to have any questions for Anthony. So we can knock off a few minutes of the break if that's okay. So if anybody's got any burning questions for Anthony right now, we've got 2 minutes. Anybody? William. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Hannah.
Thanks very much. Really excellent, because I have been involved a bit with those other organisations. This is what the kind of real understanding is, to embed it in the NHS, embed it with all the organisations, and I think you've really done that incredibly well. I think that's been the hardest thing, because nature always used to be out there, and the NHS and all the organisations there, so that's been brilliant. And you kind of said, you looked at those ONS and you said there hadn't been much change, but anxiety went down quite a lot. So I think you just need to note that, but actually, because that's the only one that when it goes down, it's good. All the others, you want them to go up, but actually, you did reduce anxiety by quite a considerable amount. Yeah.
So we are hoping to get this work published. We're talking to a journal at the moment. But yeah, again, we were supported by the national programme evaluations at Sheffield to do that analysis.
So just going forward, do you feel that there is a better now connection with the NHS and all those organisations? Do you feel that's stable, or do you still feel it's a little bit, fragile? There's
still always work to do, but I think it's definitely more on the radar across the region, and our role being able to kind of connect the voluntary sector with healthcare has been massive. So yeah, there's always still work to do, but we've had amazing connection with all sorts of different teams. And so the work in North Yorkshire with the national parks is actually funded by the Combined Authority and the mayor up there. So he's seen the impact and value in this type of work, and he's investing in it quite heavily. And it is a pilot at the moment, but hopefully there'll be long-term investment through the Combined Authority.
Okay, there was a question from Hannah, I think.
Mine was similar about the NHS and the link. So
You are right. I've got one over there.
Hi. So I was just wondering, the connection to nature, have you looked at any kind of differences in the kind of nature? So I'm thinking, like, you're really lucky here. You've got all the coasts and the moors and all of that kind of stuff. But at a smallest, does it have to be proper nature, or can it be like a city farm or something really, small?
I would say that we haven't directly, but the wider paper that York University wrote on the work that we did with social prescribing services, they have been able to break down the data and look at duration, but also categorise the types of activities. So there is a little bit in there. And again, York University have done a little bit of work looking at quality of green space. So again, sort of how do you assess what the quality is? Is it the park out here, or is it, as you say, Flamborough Head or something like that, where you're truly in nature? So there is kind of work being done, but we haven't done that directly through our work. Yeah.
Interesting.
Brilliant.
Thank you. I think we'll have to stop questions there, but I know we could spend hours on all of this. It's fascinating. So thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
And we're going to move on to Dr. Austin L. Oster and Eos Alla, who are absolute experts in research that explores self-care, social isolation, health literacy, and we're delighted that we're one of the lead sites for the research that's going on around loneliness and social isolation. And I just want to plug, on your tables, every single one of you have got a little card with a QR code, and it's a 2-minute survey on loneliness and social isolation. So if you could possibly fill that in online in the break, that would be wonderful. Take it away, share it with friends and family. We want to get as many people as possible in this region taking part, because the research will be much more meaningful. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Catherine, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone. Really good to be here. If I may just ask the technology team, is it possible to please expand the slides so I can read them instead of having to look, if it's possible? Thank you. So my first trip to Hull, thank you so much for inviting us. I'm going to try and move the slides. So we're going to talk about the hidden epidemic and what the 200 voices we've been hearing from have told us about loneliness. I think this is a really important topic, and thank you guys for picking it up locally and elsewhere. So my name is Austin. I'm director of the Self-Care Academic Research Unit, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Eos, who's the study coordinator for Interact, and also Lee Haran, who's come to spend a year in the UK with funding from China to develop work around this topic as well. So really exciting to be here, and thank you for hosting us. All right, just which way is the remote? Where should it point? There we go. So the Self-Care Academic Research Unit, if I tell you briefly about that, is a collaboration between the Self-Care Forum UK, the International Self-Care Foundation, and Imperial. And we're basically, as we've heard earlier, really looking back at what was forgotten for a long time now, given our reliance on surgery and medication. You know, we don't self-care enough, and it's really important to do something about that. So we developed the unit in 2017, and specifically to try and find new ways to tackle the epidemic of diseases of the lifestyle. We've heard about that earlier today, and the rising importance of regulating the controllable risk factors that if we prevent some of the problems, we can actually prevent, delay, or change the appearance and trajectory of disease. And what we want to do really collectively, and we've heard about this already, is to try and keep people on the left of the continuum, where they're sort of happy, hunky-dory, relying on their own sort of impulse and not costing the NHS money. But in reality, if we really want to activate people, we have to remind them of the 7 pillars of self-care. You know, how can you do self-care on a daily basis? And these are the 7 pillars that we should hear more about in a structured way. The key in the ignition is health literacy. The second pillar is health and mental well-being. We'll talk about that in a minute. Physical activity, of course, is very important. The central pillar of healthy eating, risk avoidance, good hygiene practices, and the biggest pillar of all, the rational use of products and services. This includes over-the-counter medicines, technology, and so on. And our self-care needs change as we get older, so it's important to recognize that, you know, where are we in life, and what setting are we in, and how can we work with people's capabilities and strengths to get them to live longer, healthier, and happier lives. So the talk today really is focusing on the mental health pillar, and specifically loneliness. Before we go there, just maybe recognize that there is a transformation in society that we're seeing now, very much like the transformation we've seen or we heard about when the steam engine was introduced, and that transformed the way we live our life. And then electricity was introduced, and we transformed society. And a lot of us here, not the very young people, but we've seen how digital has transformed our life. But since COVID, incidentally, we now see the near pervasive use of AI, you know, ChatGPT and all of these systems that we see, nanotechnology, blockchain, drones, you know, these are real. And we think there's going to be a non-linear expansion of possibilities in how we live our life and how we interact with others. And that's really important to keep in mind when we talk about loneliness, which has been around for a very long time. So in our talk today, we're going to focus on the mental health pillar, and specifically why loneliness matters and what we're going to do about it. We're going to talk about what we're doing at Imperial and with colleagues here and elsewhere to measure loneliness in the UK. And the alliance we're developing, also we're going to look at some of the interim findings and then discuss what the future may look like for us. So most of us have experienced loneliness, and I think if you look at the data, nationally, 26% of people, when you sample them, say, I feel lonely some or most of the time, or often. But actually, there's a kind of, say, around 6 or 7% of people that are in deep loneliness. And that's about 3.5 million people in the UK. That's quite a lot of people who are suffering in silence. Now, loneliness can be transient. I think we've had experience of that during the lockdowns for some, but when it's prolonged, people can dwell into loneliness, and that can really change the trajectory of your health and well-being. And as we've heard, it's akin to smoking 15 cigarettes a day and can really reduce your life expectancy and make you really feel miserable. So it's a global health concern. In fact, governments around the world have come together and they've even developed the WHO Commission on Social Connection, recognizing that as society is transforming, we need to do a lot more to destigmatize loneliness and find ways to tackle it, ways that work in the modern context. So loneliness and social isolation, as you would know, are very similar but actually separate concepts. Loneliness is a feeling that we have. It's an unwanted feeling. You may be in the middle of a room and feel lonely and alone. Whereas social isolation is actually measurable, it's quantifiable. You know, how many people do you connect with? How many people do you contact? Now you'll find that there are patterns as well, because some people like to live in a wood cabin and they're quite happy. You know, they're not lonely, they just choose to live there. And there are factors that we've known about for a long time, that risk factors essentially, that may make you feel a bit more lonely. For example, living alone is an important risk factor. You know, having a baby for the first time, everybody's busy and you're on your own and you don't sleep well and so on. Being a young parent, I've discussed that. Being a carer and so on. All of these risk factors are important, and the ones highlighted in blue can also make you feel more isolated. And just to highlight that loneliness is special because it's one of society's wicked problems. And what policymakers call wicked, these are the problems that you just can't throw money at and wish to go away. You know, whether it's suicide or homelessness or loneliness or domestic abuse, no matter how rich the country is, you'll always have these problems, unfortunately. So we need to think in a fresh way and come up with new solutions to try to tackle this. And just to highlight here some of the real public health outcomes of loneliness, it could increase premature mortality. Living alone increases your risk of dying from heart disease. That's not categorical, but if you are lonely. It lowers immunity and physical activity. And earlier this morning, we've heard of potentially the mechanism of why that happens. So you're under stress, you're not happy, and then you begin to shut down. So, like I said, it's a global issue, and we did some work recently, and we're expanding this research to look at the global picture. But this is a review of the policies of 52 countries, and we found that a lot is being done really by countries. The work is a bit disorienting in the sense that it's not structured. The WHO Commission on Social Connection is going to change that. So there are policies and directives in countries that we've highlighted here that talk about loneliness and how they could be addressed and what funding could be made available. And also an interesting fact, which might have changed, the UK and Japan are the only two countries in the world that have a Minister for Loneliness. It's a very interesting title, although we haven't heard from our Minister for Loneliness in a while, so I wonder how they feel about the whole thing. Now, the government responded in 2019, just before the lockdown. They published wonderful proposals to say, you know, we commit to tackle loneliness using primary care and social prescribing and link workers. And our ex-Prime Minister, Theresa May, launched the first cross-government strategy to tackle loneliness in 2018. So the UK is at the forefront of this, and I think there's a lot of work that we can do to keep the UK as a thought leader in that space. Before we get into the Interact study and what we're doing and what we found, let's have a look at the various patterns of loneliness. The best place is in the top left. You're not lonely and you're not isolated. I hope a lot of us are in that green box. But you could be lonely and not isolated. For example, in this room, there may be somebody who feels quite lonely, but they're in the middle of a whole room. Or isolated, not lonely, and so on. The worst place is that red box in the bottom. So the question is, what can we do to try and get people out of that red zone? You know, how can we get people into the green zone? And so how can communities, people, and governments and policymakers work together, and what are we going to do about it? So now we can focus on the measuring loneliness in the UK study and the reason why we're here. And measurement is the heart of science. So although there are many examples before we arrived at this to try to get a snapshot of where lonely people are in the UK and elsewhere, we wanted to expand this type of work to make it a national project with a much larger sample. So you might have heard of the BBC Loneliness Experiment, a really good experiment that was sort of supported by the BBC, and they got 50,000 people to respond to a survey, and they were able to determine sort of a national picture. And there's a census and all sorts of things that happen. So we decided to use these two measures, the UCLA-3 loneliness scale and the direct measure of loneliness by the ONS. And we developed the Interact study, which basically has a number of aims, but primarily is to create a heat map of where lonely people dwell, to determine if there are pockets of loneliness and what we can do collectively with policymakers and commissioners to try to develop place-based interventions to tackle these problems. So it's mixed methods. We have ethics from Imperial College London to engage with community. We also have ethics from the NHS Research Ethics Committee, which means we can engage with NHS patients and staff. And this is brilliant because the NHS is the biggest employer in Europe, so we're very keen now to begin to engage and collect data from them. We're very grateful for the support of the NIHR Research Delivery Network, which have helped us sort of recruit large numbers for this national study, and also the Be Part of Research Network, which is able to connect with 400,000 people who consented to be contacted about research that's relevant to them. So we were delighted that Harrison Fulham developed a British Sign Language video to help people sort of engage with our survey more. We developed a number of QR codes. You would have seen posters locally. And this QR code, by the way, is for the national. So there's a special QR code, I think, for us here in the car. So please, if you take this with you, feel free to use it and also pass it on to your friends. It can be reused. And primarily, the survey is basically quite straightforward. We translated it into 14 languages, not 11. We've had some languages asked for here. And so the respondents can choose to respond in any language they like. It's basically all multiple choice and sort of sliders, but with the one exception of please enter your postcode. And at the very end, you could leave your name and email address if you want to be interviewed. So it's a very nice vanilla way to engage with people in an anonymous way, so people can respond to the survey and not have to give their details. And we use that data to create lovely heat maps, which I'll show you in a minute. So these are some of the findings to the mixed methods research that we've done, and this will continue. So we've looked at 200,000 people, respondents so far. At the moment, we're looking at data from 163,000, so what you see is not the full sample. We've also interviewed some people, and that qualitative research is ongoing. So we developed a number of links, and each link then is sent to a different part of the country. So we've delighted to work with the Humber research team, and we've offered them a number of links that they could use to recruit from community, places of community worship, faith, from hospital settings, and from primary care. And at the moment, we're around 5,000 people from the area, but we're really keen to work with you, as you see later, to get around 20,000 people. So this is the basic descriptive findings of the sample. We've had a very good uptake, as you can see. On the left, we've had sort of a large number of young people. You can see there's a peak, and then there's sort of people disappear in the middle, quite busy at work. They're not interested in sort of responding to surveys. And then you get another peak when you're older. And the figure on the right, the violin plot, just to say that there's a concentration of younger respondents that we see here. And there's also there are some older respondents as well. So we are missing the middle block, but I suppose that's fine because we've got all the ages represented, but more so younger and older people are interested in the survey. So these are some of the key findings I could describe. And none of these, by the way, are new. We've known this, but this is now reinforced in the largest study of its kind. So loneliness is widespread and patterned, with 17% reporting frequent loneliness and more than 2/3 experiencing it at least occasionally. So I think some of us will be in this room. Young adults carry the highest loneliness burden. They record highest, showing both the highest prevalence and strongest adjusted odds of loneliness. Older adults report lower average loneliness, which to me was surprising, but apparently that's been known for some time. Now there are older adults who are quite resilient. They've been through a lot. They've been bereaved. we've spoken to some people who are really remarkable. They sort of refuse to get lonely. They see it, they try to do something about it. But of course, there are older people who live in silence. Being single, widowed, or divorced is a major risk factor. Unemployment, disability, and long-term conditions independently elevate loneliness, unsurprising. The other sort of bit of key findings here, if I get the remote to work, is, people from the global majority, or what we used to call ethnic minorities, particularly the Asian, British, and Black, African, Caribbean participants, report higher loneliness. To me, that was surprising, but there are reasons for that potentially. Social contact, of course, shows a powerful dose-response protective effect. We've heard that this morning. If you feel you belong, if you are connecting with people, you are protected. You're likely to report being less lonely. Social capital is uneven and strongly predictive depending on where you live. How safe do you feel in the community? Do you trust your community? Do you feel that there's cohesion? So the higher the social capital score, the less lonely you're likely to be. And we've identified some very hot loneliness hotspots, basically, that confirm the urban paradox. So there'll be people living in London and Manchester and big cities and in Hull that are actually surrounded by neighbours, but actually feeling quite deeply lonely. And of course, COVID amplified loneliness, unsurprising. So we found some very interesting insights here. I'll just skim through these. Females have a 16% higher risk of loneliness overall compared to males. Okay, that's interesting. If I go to some other unusual findings, we're starting to look, this is early days, but starting to look at the timestamp. So we know when people respond to the survey because there's a timestamp. So people who respond to the survey between 6 p.m. and sort of 8 p.m. Or 10 p.m. just record higher loneliness. We don't really know why that is. We're going to look into it. So don't respond to surveys between 6 to 10 p.m. I think that's the message. And also another surprising thing is employed people, according to our data, employed respondents have 13% higher risk of loneliness compared to non-employed. We're going to look at that more deeply, but these are some interesting insights that we weren't expecting. And just for the interviews, there's a lot here, but one of the most striking things is that one at the very bottom there, that after 2 failed marriages, this lady moved county, she moved elsewhere, and she retired. I think she was 60. And she said, all of my friends are working, they're still not retired, so I actually feel quite lonely. I can't reach out to them in the day, and on weekends they're busy with family. So, very interesting insights about retirement and how that could impact if life would stop for you then. Because we're surrounded by people at work and suddenly we're not. So the biggest insights from the 200,000 voices, loneliness is not a U-curve. It's a landscape with many peaks. We've seen that younger people report high loneliness. You've got the midlife loneliness crisis. That's when people are busy. There's caring for others. There's a lot of stresses. There are new parents, that sort of thing. In the late 40s and 50s, we've discussed, and teenagers, of course, report feeling lonely and sort of in the middle of the classroom or university. Again, this is known, but this is an insight that we have to remember to destigmatize or raise awareness about this, because that may be new to some people here. The loneliness paradox we've discussed. You may be in a very busy hub and then just surrounded by people, but actually you're suffering in silence. And loneliness is deeply tied to identity, place, transitions, and structural disadvantages. So be careful if you move city. Be careful if you change job. Be careful if you change relationships. These transitions sometimes may get people to feel more lonely than others, and you don't want to prolong or fall into that. So we've developed some heat maps, and as you can see, there are 2 circles here. London is on the right, and the UK or England is on the left. We're very keen to work with, now having made the point that we collect data from 200,000 people across the UK, we're a population of 80 million. That's not scratching the surface. So to really make a difference, we need to work with communities and sort of NHS foundation trusts and research and voluntary sector organizations to develop hyper-local heat maps. So we're going to do one in London, and in central London, the northwest of London, and we're here in Hull, and that's why we're here really. That's the reason why I'm here, is to just let you know about the alliance that we're developing, and hopefully that you can help us with that. So just looking to the future, We've begun to publish some of the data that we have. It's early days, and I think there's a lot of quantitative data and some qualitative data coming up. But it's not just about quantifying and measuring things. You know, we discussed the need to create a hyperlocal heat map, and thank you Hull and Humber region and our colleagues here from the research team for coming forward to say we'd want to be that place. So the medical director is supporting us, I hope, and with your support we'll be able to do that. So we want to identify hotspots. We want to develop a baseline future comparisons. We want to determine if the measures we find now are actually, they tally with predictors. We've talked about predictors and risk factors. You know, we may find that there are some stark surprises. And ultimately, it's all about informing asset-based community development, ABCD. You know, what can we do that is place-based? What would work for Hull, for example? How can you leverage the voluntary sector organizations you have, you know, the charities, the NHS, the cafes, and so on. So developing place-based interventions is going to be very important. So we want to increase the sample to 500,000 next year. But we also recognize that, as discussed, evidence without action changes nothing. But the Interact project will hopefully make a change. So we are mapping interventions now, and others are doing great work as well. We're identifying resilience factors. We want to understand what is it in some people that just gets them to be resilient. We've talked to several people who are remarkable in their attitude towards loneliness. It's like they're allergic to it, right? They feel really they've had knocks in life, but there's a resilience in them. It may be a typology and so on, but we need to know why that is. But all of this evidence we're generating is going to give us a roadmap for what needs to happen next. And the challenge now, and the opportunity really, is turning these insights into meaningful change across communities and health policies and systems. So the idea then is big but simple. We really would want to work together across different settings, you know, whether recruiting from schools and universities to community, places of worship, workplaces. You know, most people spend time in the workplace. Why not do QR codes there? Care homes and other settings, and of course to the NHS. You know, GP practices can send an SMS to patients. Patients may choose to respond. Hospitals trust may offer the survey to their staff, and staff can respond anonymously. So there's a lot of interest now, and potentially this is the rationale, this is the reason why we can make a difference here locally. So thank you for coming forward. Just to say that Hull City, and we're looking at Humber, but Hull has a population of 276,000, if that's accurate, and around 175,000 residents are 16 years or over, the eligible population. So if we want 10% of that population, we're looking at 17,500 people. So we have a long way to go. But I think with your collective support and with greater sort of input from GPs and NHS, we could recruit that sample. Then it will arrive at an international gold standard data set. We've heard from very big numbers of 2 million people in your study. So what we need is an international gold standard data set. So look, there's nothing like it. Please could you, can we work together and develop some interventions, for example, in Hull, that would make sense. I should put from your slides, I should put here not the national lottery, I should put the funder, the charity. So the idea is we want to recruit throughout Hull, and the Alliance will hopefully work together to develop a proposal that would get funded and that would help us deliver interventions that are place-based. And just to finish, I think the last slide, so the call to action really, we want to make Hull and Humber region the best place in the world for research into loneliness and interventions to help people that are suffering silence. So thank you for inviting us, and many thanks to all of the participants and to the Humber research team for making this happen. I acknowledge my colleagues here for their support, because without this, the study wouldn't be without them. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Austin. I know we're running over time. We'll still have a break and we'll still come back at 11:20, but I am going to allow some questions because I think this is just so important. Obviously, we've got 5,000 people that have completed the survey at the moment in our region. We need a lot more. So please fill in the surveys, share that QR code with friends and family, because it's much more meaningful and it means we'll get more money in, more interventions for our region. We're quite special that we've been chosen along with with London. So
thank you for coming forward. Thank you. I mean, we've recruited throughout the country, but it was Humber research team. I think some of them I recognise, Clive and Sadaf and others, who have come back and said we want to, help us do this. So thank you very much.
any questions? Laura.
Hiya, thank you for that really interesting talk. I was wondering if you have any insights into why younger people have higher rates of loneliness, and if you do, how can we make them more resilient, and is that something that's going to turn into an even bigger problem down the line, do you think?
Very important question, and I don't have personal insights yet. There are many excellent research groups, including here in Manchester. We have Professor Pamela Coulter, who's the paragon of research into loneliness in young children and younger people. And I think some of her work and other work that we've known for some time is, yes, now there's a lot of technology. People feel, we've discussed earlier, that they are in the chat room, but they feel lonely. Nobody would know if they disappeared or not. They haven't participated. I think definitely we know that Gen Z prefer talking to avatars than real people. For example, they prefer the online doctor version. We don't know why, but that's a typology, right? So I don't know the specifics of that, but I think it is also our inattention to detail, something. Attention to detail generally, or our attention span has really shrunk. In my lifetime it has. And there's the idea of micro-learning. So rarely we sit down and we really listen. We now just want short bursts of information, right? Through TikTok and so on. So this is causing a change in the way we are, the way we interact with others. Even dating and sexual interactions now are sort of all online to some people. So it is a sea change. There is the culture, the society we're talking about, and that is why it is important to characterize loneliness generally and in younger people. And of course, we've excluded, I haven't discussed here, but we've excluded people who couldn't access technology, and the really lonely people who simply will not respond or engage. So very interesting question. We need to learn a lot more about that. But the Interact study isn't going to focus specifically on that. It's going to focus on raising awareness, destigmatizing it, making it everybody's business, and making sure government is investing in the voluntary sector organization at the coalface in the NHS to help understand how we could help people in that domain. But really important aspect here.
Any more questions? Otherwise, I will break. I don't think we've got any more hands up. Okay, if we can break. Thank you, Austin. Yeah, we'll break now and we'll come back at 11:20. So there is tea and coffee at the back of the room for people. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now, and I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Carolina, who I had the pleasure of having in my team for a little while. So that was delightful. Carolina is absolutely passionate about making research more inclusive and accessible for everyone. And she's going to talk to you about her experience of engaging European communities in particular. And although this is around research, actually, I'm sure there's lessons for all of us in healthcare. So I'll hand over to Carolina. Thank you.
So again, thank you very much, Catherine, for having me, and thank you very much for giving me this chance to vocalise the things and the barriers that the community coming to and facing on a daily basis. And I really hope I will be the voice of the community altogether today. So yeah, my name is Carolina, and I've been working for the NHS for over 10 years. I was born and bred in Poland, and I graduated my nursing degree there before I came to the UK. Me and my husband just decided a few years ago that we're going to come here for a year or two and maybe learn some language and earn some money, and then we just fallen in love with the place, so we stayed. And we always joke that we stayed here for food and the weather, obviously. So I've been lucky enough to work for NHS Yorkshire and Humber for the past 3 years, and my current role, my previous role title was Engagement for Eastern European Communities Nurse. The NHS has gone into restructure right now, and it's a national thing, so it's been changed to Delivery Research Nurse, but I'm still very passionate about the communities. So let's just... before we even start, obviously we use this term Eastern European, and it's like a short because we all know what it's referring to and we know which part of the world we're talking about. But here is a little hint. If you want to speak to someone from Polish community, Slovakian, Hungarian, Czech Republic, that's actually Central Europe. So if you want to gain their trust at the beginning, please refer to this part of the world as Central Europe. Because even when I was sharing this presentation with my brother who still lives in Poland, and I asked him what he thinks about it, he was like, that's not correct title, you know. And it's just, I'm talking about the whole part of the country, but I will be a little bit biased today because I'm Polish. So I will be talking mainly about Polish experience, and I just don't feel in a position to talk for all of the countries of Eastern Europe because, you know, the culture is so different among all of them. I can't feel like I'm in a position to speak for Roma communities, for example, or foreign Yugoslavia communities, because that's just such a different experience towards the one that I've got from Poland. So let's start with some statistics. In 2021, there was 3.5 million EU migrants. And a little bit on top of that, there was EU passport holders born in the UK altogether. So it was around 4 million people altogether, which gives us about 6% of the nation. Quite a big number, to be fair. As you can see, from 2021, the number is decreasing, so more people of EU heritage is leaving the UK rather than coming in. So here is the first question. Are the EU citizens even classed as ethnic minority in the UK? Well, the whole group can't be, because, again, as I said, it's such a different culture and history to each of the countries that it's very, very difficult to just throw them one in the one box and say, well, that's the whole ethnic minority. Another hint, if you're a researcher and you're planning to engage with communities of European heritage and you building a questionnaire, for example, please try to point out at least quite few of the main nationalities, because I personally so far have only came across one questionnaire that would class white Polish nationality. All the rest of it is just white other, and that's, you know, it's quite upsetting to think about yourself like you, the other guy. So Office for National Statistics recognizes Poles, for example, as ethnic minority. And we've got quite a few obstacles that I would like to talk you through today that we can come across as a researchers. So first one is white migrants might not be recognized as ethnic minority group by themselves or by society altogether. And that's a very, very broad topic. Unfortunately, we won't have enough time to cover it all fully today. Yeah, so that's the definition of ethnicity that I found on the internet. It's defined by a shared common culture and history, gathering aspects like language, religion, traditions, ancestry, and national origins. So, surprisingly, there is nothing about skin color, for example, which might be a bit misleading sometimes, and some of the migrants themselves might not even realize that, you know, they might be an ethnic group in a certain country, but they just don't even know about it. And, well, first obstacle is, as I said, migrants might not want to be seen as this ethnic group because they falsely associated with weakness in the way they see it. And that might be for various reasons. First of all, they might not be interested into assimilation with the society altogether that much, which takes away opportunities from them, unfortunately. And I would say there is a little bit of lack of just being informed about it. Second one is work, definitely. So people mainly from Europe come to the UK to work. They spend long, long hours working, doing overtime, so they just physically have no time for any activities apart from work. So this slide shows really nicely that in 2021, employment rates for UK was around 71%, whether for EU migrants it was 78%. And at the top of it, I'm not sure if you are able to see it, Polish migrants, it's 83%, then it's Lithuania, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Latvia, so all Central and Eastern Europe, as I said. So people just mainly come to work and they just don't see like they need to socialize, or they don't have time to socialize or spend any really valuable time with making connections with people around them, apart from their colleagues. So second reason is recent political mood towards migrants and need to blend in. I don't think I need to explain that into many details. Unfortunately, European migrants has been used as bargain chip since Brexit campaign, or even before that. And it's been, the moods towards the migrants are not the best at the minute, and they just want to blend in as much as possible. They don't want to be seen like, you know, they might be the reason for misunderstanding, or they don't want to be patronized because of that, or they don't want to be punished, so they just do anything in their power to make sure that they're not being seen as this vulnerable group that needs some extra support. Is that a good approach? I don't know. I don't feel like I'm in a position to answer that question, to be fair. But I can tell you a little bit about my own experience with this. When I first came to the UK, I was really adamant and really eager to make sure that I blend in as much as possible, and I really didn't want to be seen as this, you know, girl who comes from a different world. And I was trying to follow all of the traditions around and make sure that I'm, like, you know, 100% blending in. And I heard from people many times saying, well, you're doing so great, why all the migrants can't be just like you? And at first I thought, that's really good that they say something like this. I must be doing such a great job. But then it made me realise, no matter what I do, I will never be 100% British, because I'm not. And that's all right, and that's absolutely fine. But that's just, you know, that put me into this vicious circle of doing things only to please people around me. And I know they will never be pleased, because there will be always someone who will say, well, that's actually not the way to go. You know, so we were talking about sense of belonging this morning quite a lot, and I think that took the sense of belonging from me away. Another thing for not being able to blend in is, well, it's good and it's not good that Eastern Europe is not too far away, because it's only 2 hours flight from here, so we can visit quite regularly. But then at the same time, it gives you this feeling that you don't belong anywhere, because you go there and you see the differences between how people live there and how people live here, and you think to yourself, wow, I wouldn't be able to live like this anymore. But then you come here and you realise that you miss your family, and you think to yourself, is that the right thing that I did, you know, moving away from all of my families? My kids are missing out because they can't see their grandparents on a regular basis. So that makes you feel like you sort of don't belong anywhere, which is not great, and it's definitely referring to loneliness that we were talking about earlier on today. So we were also talking that kids can help with social isolation, and at first when I saw this slide earlier today, I thought, I really don't know how that can be possible, but then it made me realise that my kids definitely helped me with that, because they, even though they were born and bred in Hull, and their Hull accent is absolutely spot on, you would never say they come from Polish heritage. They're so proud of their heritage that they talk about it at school all the time. They talk about their favourite dishes and traditions, and obviously having kids, you sort of have to socialise with mums and teachers at school, so that it makes you feel like you belong to this group. So that definitely helps. Third reason is this mindset of being here only temporary. So as I mentioned at the beginning, me and my husband were thinking that we're only coming here for a year, maybe 2. And I know plenty of people, and I know this because I'm not a scientist whatsoever. I'm a nurse, and I meet a lot of people on my way through my career, and I work with a lot of people from the ethnic minority backgrounds. And that's just based on their stories and my story. So a lot of them say, and they just try to reassess every time I see them, if they're going to go back to their country of origin or not. And they're waiting for another push to do something that, you know, will make them to do it. But then I see them the year after, and they're still here, and they still don't know if they make up the decision or not. I can see quite a lot of workers that, you know, as I said at the beginning, work long hours, do a lot of overtime, and they just surviving rather than living in HMOs where they miss their families. They don't have any opportunity to thrive in their life. They absolutely extremely lonely, go into all sorts of addictions, and unfortunately, and they have this this mindset that, you know, they will spend here another year or two, and they earn X, Y, and Z amount of money, and then they will definitely go back, and that just goes on. And that leads us to another reason, which is lack of understanding the healthcare system. Because these people don't really feel like they belong here, they don't feel the need of registering with GPs, for example. Because, you know, as I said before, Poland is not too far away. Eastern European countries are 2 hours flight away from here. So it's sometimes way easier to buy this 20 quid ticket to book this Ryanair and go to Poland and have your health concerns sorted privately, for example. And I would like to just clarify that Poland, for example, have got a public healthcare system. You can use it for free when you pay your national insurance there, you're elderly or you're a child or a job seeker. So, but private healthcare is also very popular, and it's affordable, especially when you're earning pounds. So it's just sometimes easy to catch this flight, you know, and go there for a few days and have all of your health concerns sorted. And then unfortunately, when it comes to emergencies, for example, and we see these patients in a hospital, which I did as well in my previous role, then it's a massive problem because we don't know anything about their health problems from the past. I even know people that have chronic diseases and they don't take any medication and they haven't got anything prescribed in the UK because they still use the services back in Poland, and they pay full price for their prescriptions and they ask their family members to send them across. So that's obviously very difficult, but there is a lot of people that are living like this, unfortunately. I could talk about this healthcare differences for hours. I know we've got no time today for it, but as I said, another one, accessibility to healthcare as well. I know that we all educated and we all in medical field, but I know there is not a single person in this room that wouldn't feel anxious about contacting your GP in the morning. So now imagine that you're adding this layer on top of it, not knowing what to do, who to speak to, what to expect, and that you, for example, English is not your first language. And even though quite a lot of people speak, well, fairly good English, they don't feel confident in the medical field with explaining medical problems. So that's just super difficult, and we need to be aware of that as well. And sometimes, you know, the language associations or language lines are not available straight away. And I know that because I worked in a hospital, and I know that for some of the languages, not very popular ones, we would have to wait for a translator for 3 or 4 days. So another difference in, well, that's another very long topic, but another difference in healthcare system is expectations that people have. So there's been mentioned this morning that UK healthcare system is focusing quite a lot on prevention, and this is not something that people get used to, because they get used to doctors that prescribe them a lot of medication, and person goes to see their GP about a foot that is painful, and they've been said that, you know, they've been advised to do quite a lot of medical tests, and that's the expectation. And as I said, in Poland, for example, private healthcare is quite popular and it's fairly affordable. So if the people don't have the outcome that they expect from the general practitioner, they will just go privately and ask for what they need. So if they don't come across the same thing in the UK, then they will be like, well, what's the point if I can just do it if I go abroad, you know? So yeah, this accessibility of healthcare might be a bit daunting. If I've got enough time, I just got another really little thing. A few years ago, I was helping Yorkshire Research Council with the research project that was. The question was directed to Romanian and Polish women, and it was asking about why they don't take the smear tests in the UK and why they don't stay on top of their smear tests. And we did quite a few focus groups with the women, and the stories that they were telling about discrimination were just horrible. And I'm sure it's not applicable only to ethnic women, but to all women, unfortunately, in the healthcare. And I know we're aware of it right now, and I know we work towards it, which is great. But the outcome of the study was that these women have their SME tests done, but just not in the UK. They prefer to do it in their countries of their origin, because when they go on holiday, for example, they can have it done there where they feel more comfortable. Myself, for example, I haven't been to British dentist in 6 years, since before the pandemic. I just go every time I'm there because I know what to expect, and I just prefer it that way. So I guess sometimes it's people use the healthcare abroad because they can as well. So that's just a few topics that I wanted to cover today. Then the obstacles that we talked about, because I don't want this presentation to only hear like I'm mourning here and it's just a list of problems that we're facing. But hopefully knowing all of this can give you a little bit better understanding why some people make decisions that they do and where it's all coming from. And please just don't start your engagement with some created pictures and assumptions in your head and stereotypes in your head. Because I came across few comments in my life. When my mom in 2018 got diagnosed with breast cancer, I was so petrified that I went to see my GP just outside Hull, and he's told me, well, you obviously don't have healthcare back home, so you just come here and abusing the system. And that's absolutely not true. And that's, quite a lot of people from Eastern European countries that I've spoken to came across something like this, and that's just lack of knowledge and ignorance. So let's just not start your conversation with assumptions and stereotypes that are quite harmful, and I guess that's just universal advice for everyone. But some of the stereotypes that we face quite a lot is that we live in this poor ex-Soviet Union conditions, and we live in this miserable, depressing block of flats, that we've got empty shelves and we just don't have access to this big world. And I was even asked while living in the UK if we've got coffee shops in Poland, for example. So it's just, I'm really pleased that Krakow, for example, is more and more popular because people can go there and see with their own eyes. It is 21st century there. So yeah, another one is obviously stereotypes around drinking and abusing alcohol. And I remember when I first joined this job, I was asked to help with the study around drinking habits of people from Romania. And it was very, very difficult to approach this community because there is this feeling that it's been misunderstood, that automatically all of the people from Eastern Europe are drunks because they do low-paid jobs in the UK, and that's just not really true, and that they all poorly educated, so they just go into alcohol. Obviously, a problem with alcohol and drugs is driven by loneliness for some of the people. That's something that we touched on this morning. Another one, and I didn't put any picture in here on purpose because I didn't want it to be like seen as a joke, but another one is this stereotype in the media that we face. If you think about representation from Eastern Europe, there isn't any character that I can think of that is positive that I came across in media, in films, or in TV series. Usually it's Russian mafia or some gangsters. There is very little of that. There is a forecast presenter in BBC that's called Thomas, I can't remember his last name now. Anyway, his name Thomas is spelled Tomas, which is Polish way of spelling it. That's one of my son's name as well, and he's absolutely absolutely over the moon knowing that there is a man in the TV that's got a name just exactly like his. So representation really matters. But unfortunately, this representation of Eastern European communities that we face from the media, from everywhere around, it's just not the best one, and it grows somewhere inside us. And even if we want it or not, there is this little unconscious bias there about it. But yeah, that's all that I've got for today, and I would like to, if I could, I would talk about it for hours. I just wanted to mention at the end that I work for NIHR right now, and we've got comms team and inclusion team within NIHR, our regional network, Yorkshire and Humber. So if you're interested, you can always email me about this topic, or if you're interested in the broader spectrum, then inclusion team is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. We're slightly over time. If anybody's got a question, a burning question, otherwise we're going to move on to the next speaker. I don't see any hands. Oh, Jean, right.
I've got to do this.
Go on.
Where were you when Hull had the City of Culture?
I was on maternity leave.
Right. Because I think Hull as a city made a lot of friends with Europeans during that time, including people like yourself coming from. Where?
Poland.
Poland, of course, but where in Poland?
Central Europe. Oh, where? In Poland. Oh, that's a long story because I've lived all over.
But what I'm trying to say is, through the City of Culture, I believe we embraced and made some real good friends of Polish people, who some of them are living down south now, silly buggers. But there you are. I'm still in contact.
Yeah, definitely. Things like City of Culture helps, and there is a lot of positive impact that's going around in the city, and I would never say there isn't, but then there are a few negative things that happen alongside as well, bearing in mind riots from the last year. They weren't directed only into a certain group of migrants, they were directed into all sorts of migrants, and we were all just scared to go out and speak in our native language outside of our house. So yeah, unfortunately, we always try to look at the positive aspects, but it's quite a lot of the negativity around right now. But it's good to know that there are people like you, and there are things that are happening that have got positive impact.
And one thing very positive I would say is the work ethic that you brought to this country was remarkable and had a very positive impact.
My manager sits just there, so you can say that.
Thank you, Carolina.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move swiftly on to Claire, Melanie and Sarah. Claire, I have to say, is a fantastic example of how you can combine research and being a wonderful clinical practitioner. I'm going to say that because she's employed by our trust. And Melanie is going to share her lived experience, and Sarah's a wonderful example of how our trust and academia work fantastically together. So I'm honoured that you're here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us today. We're going to start with... Oh, gone wrong already.
You're a clinician, not a technician. That's what you say.
That's what I'm saying. I'm a clinician, not a technician. We'll get there. So we're here to talk to you about our research project, which is the SPIRE, Supporting Parent-Infant Relationships Equitably. I'm Claire, specialist nurse with the perinatal mental health team, the clinical lead. And
Sarah, I'm a researcher at the University of York.
And I'm Mel, I'm the peer support worker in the perinatal team.
We're going to let Mel start by giving a description of her experiences.
I'll apologise first because I am going to read from what I've written. So, my name's Melanie Miller and I'm here today to share my lived experience of perinatal mental health challenges and the impacts that it had on my journey to motherhood. So for me, becoming a mum was never straightforward. I spent 14 years trying to conceive, years filled with tests, tears and waiting. And when I finally found out I was pregnant, I carried an overwhelming anxiety throughout. I couldn't quite believe it was real or that it would last. She was so longed for, yet I couldn't let myself imagine bringing her home. When the day finally came, it wasn't a joyful experience I had dreamed of. I experienced what was later found to be a missed placenta abruption. When I first went into the hospital, I was told I simply had a low pain threshold and I was in latent labour. Assumptions were made that as a first-time mum, I didn't know what labour felt like, and no other reason for why I was in so much pain was explored. Before I knew something was seriously wrong, I remember saying over and over again to anybody that would listen, "I think I'm dying, something is seriously wrong." My voice was loud, my tears were loud, my fears were loud, but I wasn't listened to. By the time the abruption was identified, my daughter Tilly was critically ill. She was placed on life support, and I remember standing there numb, terrified and completely powerless. I didn't get the first cuddles or those magical early bonding moments I'd imagined for all those years, and despite everything we'd been through, I didn't receive any mental health support at that time. After 3 long weeks, Tilly was well enough to come home, but I was a shadow of my former self. I often described her as being a difficult baby. She had severe colic and cried constantly. But what I now know is that our relationship had started in trauma, and I didn't yet have the tools or support to repair it. Tilly being so unwell, alongside my own traumatic experience of the abruption, cemented my belief that something terrible would happen. I couldn't switch off my fear or the anxiety that she might die, and at the same time, I felt deeply conflicted because I didn't feel bonded, and I didn't feel the love the way I thought I should. That realisation brought shame and resentment not towards her but towards myself, for feeling so detached when I'd longed for her for so many years. That disconnection wasn't about lack of love, it was a survival response that took time, support and compassion to begin to understand her cries as communication rather than a threat, and to trust myself enough to let her in emotionally. For those first few months, she spent much of her time with my mum, which only deepened the guilt and self-loathing. Thoughts swelled through my mind: she'd better be off without me, she hates me, she doesn't settle with you, she prefers a nana. I was so detached from Tilly that I didn't believe she was mine. When trying for a baby, I had imagined warm Sunday morning snuggles and the moment I'd finally be called mummy. The truth was, my journey felt like I was in the trenches. I didn't want this screaming baby. I had unconsciously protected myself from out of fear she would die. I didn't feel love, I felt trapped and panicked, and in my darkest moments, I begged my husband to let me have her adopted. In those early months, our interactions were shaped by my anxiety, more than attunement. When she cried, I felt panic rather than instinct, and when she smiled, I questioned if it was real or if I was reading it wrong. I became hypervigilant to every noise and movement, and my exhaustion meant I missed out on some of her cues. Looking back, I can see how my fear of losing her created distance, and I was protecting myself from a pain I thought was inevitable. For 14 years I dreamt of this moment, and now it had happened. I couldn't tell anyone how I truly felt, so I masked. I masked for 6 long months. I performed motherhood, feeding, holding, changing her, but inside I was breaking. Then came the intrusive thoughts. What if I just throw her down the stairs? They horrified me, and I felt I must be a terrible person to even think of them. But now I know they were a symptom of intrusive anxiety, not just intent or danger, but still I was terrified. I went to my GP desperate for help. I told him that everything that I didn't enjoy life, that I was scared of my thoughts. He didn't look up and he said, "Let's prescribe sertraline." I remember walking out feeling small, unheard and ashamed. I then saw the practice nurse on the same day, and through tears I repeated my words, "I can't do this, I don't want to be here doing this," and she smiled and said, "Baby blues, it'll pass." I left the surgery crying, labelled unheard and unsafe, and I often think, what if that was my only chance to survive and it was missed? But luckily for me, my story didn't end there, and when I had my second child, Charlie, in 2022, I was referred into the perinatal mental health team, and that's changed everything. This time I was met with understanding, compassion and expertise. I had an incredible mental health nurse who quite literally held my hand through each stage. She helped me understand maternal-infant relationships, encouraged me to talk openly and gently challenged the guilt and doubt I carried. When I questioned my bond, she used evidence-based insight to show me that connection isn't always instinct, but it's built through care, attunement and love over time. That support for me was truly life-changing. It taught me that motherhood can be both beautiful and brutal, and that for many women the two coexist. Today, I stand here not just as someone who survived perinatal mental health, but as somebody who now works to support others through their own journey. I'm proud to be the first perinatal peer support worker within the Trust, a role where I use my lived experience to walk alongside women, offering empathy, hope and practical support during one of the most vulnerable times in their lives. I also help to deliver the Circle of Security Intervention Programme, an attached-based programme that helps parents understand and respond to their baby's emotional needs, and it's about creating safety, understanding and repair for both the baby and the parent. It's a real privilege to not only work with such an amazing team and compassionate team, but also to be able to support women at one of their most vulnerable and transformative times in their lives. My journey into motherhood was life-changing and challenging, but it gave me a purpose. And I hope my story reminds everybody here, researchers, clinicians, students, that behind every intervention or piece of data, there is a real woman, a real family, and a story that matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. So, Mel's given us an excellent introduction to why our research project is important. Essentially, it's about identifying parent-infant relationship problems. So just a bit of a background to our research then. So relationships are important between parents, caregivers and an infant. It promotes emotional security and healthy development. And it's crucial to identify and support parents and carers at a really early point. As Mel has described, she didn't get that support early. But there's a lack of suitable tools for clinicians and practitioners to use to identify with families where there may be a problem. So some new guidance was published, last year, on starting conversations with parents and caregivers about the relationships with their children. And this guidance tells us about 3 conversation prompts, questions, if you like. And the implementation of this guidance wasn't mandatory. In fact, actually quite a lot of people didn't even hear about it. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of the kind of things that can get in the way of positive parent-infant relationships, and Mel's actually nicely described some of the things actually on the journey to parenthood. So there can be parent factors or vulnerabilities such as mental health problems, physical health problems. There can be infant factors such as temperament. Different babies behave differently and have different feelings and stress points. You might if you think about your own kids, they're not the same, are they? Some cry more, some need more care, some are more relaxed. So there's infant factors. There's family and social environments. For example, the relationships that you have around you that can support you in being a parent. And your social environment is critical as well. Do you have any problems in your social situation, like loneliness? Are you on your own doing this parenting thing? What about your house? What about your home? Is it safe for you? All those risk factors. And your physical health and development of the infant. What about, like, Tilly, what about if she was poorly, born early and in the neonatal intensive care unit? What does that mean for the relationship that a parent might have with their infant? And generally, the early experiences that start in the womb, actually. The early experiences that can impact on relationships. I'm going to hand over to you now. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. Watch me not be very smooth with this clicker now. You might have to take it back off me. So obviously we are hearing about the critical importance of those really early parent-infant relationships. They provide the bedrock for future health and development, and I think that was captured really beautifully in the first presentation and actually all the way through the morning here today. So the Department of Health and Social Care, through the Policy Research Programme at NIHR, put out a commissioned call for research to evaluate a new set of guidance that, as Claire mentioned, has been rolled out over the last kind of 18 months really. So this is a PDF, this guidance. It exists as a PDF. And it is a set of 3 prompt questions that practitioners can use to hold and support conversations with caregivers about bonding and relationships. And it's a set of 3 steps that are, the prompts are the first step, and then the second step, if needs or difficulties are identified, to then look to using a tool or a standardised measure to explore those difficulties in more detail. And then the third step is to think about onwards referrals to appropriate services in the area. And in the guidance, which again is a PDF, there's some information about how to structure those conversations and what responses you might get and how you might respond as a practitioner. And it's targeted not exclusively but mostly at health visitors, midwives, nursing associates, family support workers, social workers. And it's been quite passively rolled out, so it was released on the Department for Health and Social Care's website and then distributed via Start for Life teams in local authorities that are lucky enough to have had that government funding. The QR code takes you to the guidance. Oh, I did it. So yeah, these are the 3 steps in the guidance that I've already described. The prompt questions are, what 3 words or phrases would you use to describe your relationship with your baby? What brings you the most joy in the relationship with your baby? And what is your biggest fear about your relationship with your baby? And that is also supported by a kind of general observation by the practitioner of the parent-infant interactions. And so we were successful as a partnership. So the University of York, University of Huddersfield, and our lovely colleagues in Humber NHS Foundation Trust, who we love working with, we were successful in getting the funding for this project. It's quite a short project. It's not a huge amount of money. So we're doing what we can to help the Department of Health and Social Care understand how this is being implemented and what might be needed in the future to support a wider rollout, if indeed that's recommended from the research. So they have been closely involved in shaping the research objectives for this project, and we meet with them monthly to feed back insights and learning and hope therefore to have an impact on how this is rolled out in the future. So our objectives are, what do parents, caregivers and practitioners think of the prompts? Are they acceptable and accessible for all families? And do the prompts help parents and caregivers get the support they need? And we're doing a multiple case study design for this project. So we've got 6 sites. We've got Hull, Blackpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Islington and Kent as research sites for this project. And we're doing a mix. Did I miss Hull?
No.
Okay,
just well remembered.
We're doing a mix of qualitative and quantitative research methods in each of those sites to gather data. And there's kind of 3 strands to that work. This work is ongoing, so I don't have a huge amount of findings for you, but I do have an invitation at the end. So our first strand is to qualitatively, through interviews and focus groups, depending on what caregivers would prefer, to explore their experiences of having conversations about parent-infant relationships with practitioners, and if applicable, their experience of the prompts. So the embedding of the prompts across our research sites varies widely, from being used ad hoc by individual practitioners to being integrated into routine health visiting contacts to being embedded with adaptations and workforce training scaled out across all those stakeholder groups. So we've got a real good variation in the sort of implementation patterns across those 6 areas. So in some areas we might have caregivers involved in our study who have never heard of the prompts, and in others they will have heard them from their health visitor, for example. So we're interested in their experiences of that, and a real core focus is this research is equity. So we want to hear from diverse caregivers from seldom heard and underserved groups, because we suspect that there will be challenges in implementing and rolling these prompts out for some of those groups, and that might end up in an inequitable situation where some families are not getting asked about parent-infant relationships. We're also talking to practitioners about their views on the prompts and their experiences of implementing them and their training needs, and we're talking to service managers and leads about service leads about their decisions to adopt or not, and why they've taken the approach to implementation that they have. We are also very tentatively exploring the impact of the prompts quantitatively, which was a requirement of the research. So we are going to do some exploratory work looking at rates of referrals into appropriate parenting support interventions and services in each of the sites before and after the introduction of the prompts, again, where they've been embedded. This is partly to try and start to explore whether this is actually feasible, so to see, is it possible to get this data? Does it tell us anything meaningful to support future design of potential future research projects? So we're very tentative about what we will learn from that particular piece. And then finally, our plan is to synthesise the findings from all those different fieldwork areas into impressions of implementation in each of the individual sites. So what have we learnt from that fieldwork in each individual site? What can we say about their implementation? And then we're going to synthesise and look at the kind of bigger picture messages from across the sites, bringing those to a big stakeholder workshop next March, where we're hoping to co-produce some very actionable recommendations for services who would like to implement these prompts or other kind of strategies to support these really important conversations about parent-infant relationships. And there's an Eventbrite that's about to go live for that. If anybody is interested in contributing to that and coming along or hearing more about the study, we have got our email address there, and also come and find me or Claire. And then just to say a big thank you. So a thank you to Mel for sharing her experiences today. I think you really perfectly outlined the importance of normalising conversations about parent-infant relationships. We do have a lived experienced group that supports this study, and an actual co-applicant, co-investigator on this grant called Katie Baines, who actually lives in Hull. So she's our public co-applicant and has also contributed to the development of this project. And thank you to our co-applicants, Humber, all the rest, all our sites, etc. Have I managed to save you some time now, Catherine?
You've been great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Right. Any questions? Oh, over there.
It's not actually a question. I wanted to kind of continue what you said and just acknowledge Mel. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and just to appreciate that it can't be easy reliving it and telling us about it. But I'm so pleased that you did, and that you've turned your experience into something positive. So thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? No? Well, thank you. That was wonderful. Okay, we're going to move on to Professor Emma Wolverson. I'm delighted, as I am with all the speakers. I keep saying I'm delighted, but I really am delighted to have Emma here. Myself and Emma started at Humber in the same year, so we've kind of been on a bit of a journey together, I feel. So Emma started as a clinical psychologist who was helping with research and interested, kind of moved along the journey to actually being the chief investigator for research, and is now a professor. So she's done the whole thing. So I'm delighted to welcome Emma back to the Trust. So thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Catherine. It's really lovely to be here. And I'm going to talk about a study that's funded by the NIHR that started in January this year. And it's a 30-month study, and it's called Find Me. I'll see if I can click along, which stands for Family Interventions in Mental Health Environments. It started off very much as a service improvement project when I was working in Humber, trying to look at how we could improve the care of people living with dementia on our mental health wards, and grew into a research programme. So like all the best research started with kind of our clinical experience around what was challenging and what was difficult and what needed to change in services. So it's really nice to come back and talk about it. Usually, whenever I talk about this study, I have to explain what mental health wards are and what they do and how they support people with dementia. But I'm guessing that as I'm in a mental health trust today, most people in the room have a sense of what an inpatient mental health ward does and the support it provides. But it's really interesting because most people living with dementia and their families absolutely do not know what a mental health ward does. And most people have no idea that a person living with dementia might be sectioned and might end up in an inpatient ward for their care and support. It's just not on people's radar when they're diagnosed with dementia. And so it carries a lot of fear and a lot of stigma and a lot of misunderstanding for people as well. It's also not very well known amongst policymakers, so there's no mention at all in the NICE guidance for dementia about inpatient mental health wards. We don't know the number of inpatient mental health wards, there's no national database, no idea how many wards exist, and there's no standard model for inpatient dementia care either. So some wards in the country are mixed wards, which means they care for people with dementia alongside older people with other mental health problems. And some wards are specialist dementia units, purpose-built. Some have male and female separate wards. And there's absolutely no evidence base about the best way to deliver care in these settings. So we really don't know what works. And as you would expect, the reason that a person might be admitted to a mental health ward when they're living with dementia is usually around risk. So risk to self and others, just like we see in other inpatient settings. But when you're living with dementia, the risks can look slightly different. So they might be around people getting lost in the community, they might be around neglect, they might be around people not eating and drinking. So slightly different risks. And people are admitted from hospitals like Hull Royal, people are admitted from care homes, and it's quite common that people have done a bit of a tour of care homes before they come into us. And also people can be admitted from their own homes, people who've been living in the community, managing really well, and then crisis hits and people get into all sorts of trouble. I think it's really hard often to stand up. I was at Dementia Congress this week in Manchester, and hearing about some incredible practice people are doing, and we've worked so hard to challenge the stigma around dementia and to talk about the fact that people with dementia can and do live well with dementia. And there's been, our national strategy was called Living Well with Dementia, and there's been a real effort to challenge stigma and stereotypes. And then when I trundle along and talk about risk and the fact that things can go wrong, it feels really difficult, and it's quite a difficult conversation to have. It almost feels like we've kind of swung too much into the positive. And so then when people do struggle and when people reach crisis, they feel quite a lot of stigma. A lot of carers feel quite embarrassed or ashamed and feel like they've failed. We know very little about who with dementia is admitted to mental health wards. There is no record. So when someone is sectioned, so most people with dementia that come onto an inpatient ward are admitted under a section of the Mental Health Act because they, at that point, might not be able to give capacity to consent to come in, have the capacity to consent to come in. But there's no database, so dementia isn't recorded in the Mental Capacity Act. So we cannot know how many people with dementia are currently detained under the Mental Health Act. There's no record of that. The biggest data set we have is from 4 wards across the country. And what that shows is, as you might expect, it tends to be older people, but that people with a young onset dementia, those whose dementia starts before the age of 65, are overrepresented in these wards. And that's because we don't have very good service models for people with young onset dementia, so they tend to reach crisis. It's men and women. It tends to be people in the more advanced stages of their dementia. What we see is a lot of people that come in with missed palliative and end-of-life care needs. So a high proportion of people die very quickly after discharge because there's a very unwell group. So you get very complex medical needs alongside distress. What do you think the average length of stay is for someone with dementia in a mental health ward? What do you think? Shout out, any guesses? 4 weeks? Any advance on 4 weeks? 3 months? It's 100 days. That's a long time to be in hospital for anyone, but certainly when you're living with dementia. And the aims of admission probably make sense to us. It's probably common sense, isn't it? You come in to work out why someone's distressed, and we look at how we can manage that person's distress and where they might best live to ensure they don't reach that level of distress again. But for families and people with dementia, these aims are not clear. Families are often told that an admission is to a safe place, that their dementia will be treated, that things will improve, and then they'll go home. And none of that is true. Mental health wards are not safe places for people with dementia, particularly when we fill them with antipsychotics and they fall over as well. Most people don't return home. These wards are often a gateway to institutional care for most people with dementia. Higher levels of assaults on inpatient dementia wards than in prisons, and families are not prepared and for what this experience will involve. So unsurprisingly then, if people aren't clear what the aims are, if they've never heard of these wards, if they don't know what they do, that families' experiences are really polarised. So some people will tell you that the inpatient admission was the best thing that happened to them. Things were terrible in the hospital or the care home, and thank goodness this team came along. And some people will tell you it was the worst thing that happened to them, and they wish they'd never rung the ambulance and that admission had never happened. And a lot of the families that you speak to who've had a mental health admission demonstrate really high levels of trauma. And I don't use that word lightly. It is a really traumatic experience, the events leading up to the admission and the admission itself for the person and their families. And so a lot of family members need support in their own right at this point. There's lots of policies around mental health wards that talk about the importance of staff working in partnership with families, and that when we work with families we have all these improved outcomes. So we get people home faster, they relapse less often, they engage more with their treatment. But when you speak to families, their experiences are highly variable. So some people talk about feeling overlooked, ignored, and some people talk about being actively excluded from involvement from mental health wards. Some wards don't allow families into the ward at all. Other wards have open visiting policies. There really is no standardisation of how we work and support families. And that's really where this study comes in. And it's really looking at how we can hear more from the experiences of family carers during this time about their needs for support and their needs for involvement. To understand from staff their perspectives on working with families and how they work with families and what the barriers might be to working in partnership in this way. And then to co-produce ways forward, really, to improve that partnership working so that we can hopefully improve patient outcomes. The picture that you can see there in a very sunny Aberdeen is the PPI group, the Patient and Public Involvement Group, who are part of this study, who all have experience of inpatient dementia admissions, either as a family carer or a person with dementia. And they've been instrumental in co-writing the study and shaping the study. So it's truly co-designed, which has been fantastic. So we're doing a national survey of every inpatient dementia ward in the UK. We thought when we wrote the bid there might be around 100. We've already found over 200 because they're not networked, they're not joined up, they're not listed anywhere. And that's really important to find out the different models, but also for future research. We need to connect these wards together so that we can work with them. We're doing interviews with family carers, so current carers who've got relatives on mental health wards, but also carers who've been discharged. And that was our PPI group who said that's really important because sometimes when your relative's under the care of a ward, you can't speak openly or you worry about saying things. We're also doing some observations across 3 wards, so we're spending time looking at how staff interact with and involve families. When do they ring families? When do they not? What are those interactions like? Whose job is that? How does that work? And we're pulling all that information together to co-design resources for wards to improve that partnership working and for families, crucially, as well. The other really big part of the Find Me study is a public engagement programme which sits alongside it, which is really about raising awareness about these wards and the fact that they exist. So letting people with dementia and their carers know about these wards, so that it isn't a shock and it isn't as frightening, and people are a little bit more prepared. So we've been going out across different dementia community groups, memory cafes, to talk about mental health, to try and break down some of that stigma. And we've got a group tomorrow with the butterflies in Hull to talk about mental health, which will be fantastic. The second phase of our public engagement work, which starts next year, is about working with care homes. So when care homes are saying we want this person sectioned and it needs to happen now, what are they telling the families that means? How do they explain to families what's going to happen? And one of the carers that works with us, whose mum was admitted from a care home, was told not to cut her mum's nails because she'd need them to defend herself in the mental health ward. So I really don't know what staff think's happening in these wards, and the impact that must have going into a ward. And when we started in January, ethics was tricky because this is vulnerable people in the eyes of the ethics committee, so it took a bit of time. But so far we've got 60 responses from wards to the survey. That's going up all the time. We've done 25 interviews with current carers, and discharged carers, 24 interviews. We've spent 50 units, like 3-hour blocks on different wards, observing practice. And we've started to co-create some resources from that learning, which has been fantastic. So we've got a lovely navigation guide for family carers that really just, it's a bit like the Emma's Diary you used to get in pregnancy, that kind of takes you through all the phases, what to pack, what to bring, what to ask. We've got a guide to the Mental Health Act and all those weird terms and all the legal things, and Welsh versions and Scottish versions as well. So lots of resources being created already and used by families. So I hope that I can come back when it's finished and share the results and talk about how we're improving care. But we've got lots going on. We've got a newsletter if people are interested. We've got lots of these resources on our website to share with families. And we've just started recording with families for our podcast that comes out next year to share experiences. And I just wanted to finish with a quote from our co-researcher who lives with dementia, who's joined online to watch today. And he said, "At last a project that will concentrate on us and our loved ones and enable us to navigate the complexities ahead." So thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. Anybody got any questions? No questions. Gosh, thank you, Emma. If anybody does think of anything, oh God, Gina's got one. Who I have the pleasure of working alongside. So Rachel hasn't actually been in our team for that long. She works within our research team, but she's absolutely transformed the way that we approach social media, get out there into our communities. She's so creative. She'll even go down the street with a microphone and ask people what they think. So she'll literally do anything. So I'm going to let Rachel tell you a bit about this, and then I'm going to speak just for 2 minutes afterwards. So we will have hopefully caught up time enough that I'm hoping our Chief Exec, Michelle, is going to be able to say a few words before we finish for lunch as well. So I'm going to hand over to you, Rachel, and then I'll pop back up for questions.
So hi everyone, I'm Rachel and I'm an assistant research practitioner here in the Trust. As Catherine explained, I joined in February, so I'm relatively new. And this is actually the first conference of ours that I've been to. But for anyone who may have come to one before, we normally show a video which highlights our key activities and achievements from the previous financial year. This year we wanted to do a little something different, and we really wanted to highlight the people behind the research, so everyone that makes it possible, from participants to clinicians to research champions across our trust and the universities we work with. So a small team of us got together, brainstormed, and we eventually came up with the idea of a week in the life of our research team. So the idea is for it to give you sort of a general idea of what happens in our team on a typical week. But for anyone who works in research knows, every day is very different and it really depends on the day, the month, the year and what research we've got going on at the moment. Everything you see is filmed and edited by ourselves, so it was a work in progress, trial and error, but we're really proud of actually what we've made, and we're also really proud and thankful for the people who agreed to be filmed. So I know some people are in the room today, so thank you so much. We've got such a wide range of people in the video, and it really shows the different types of people that can be involved in research. So I'll stop waffling, and then hopefully the video should play.
Every study begins with an idea, sometimes from external partners, sometimes homegrown right here. It takes planning, proposals, funding applications and a lot of behind-the-scenes prep.
It's Monday morning and the team meet to plan the week ahead. Mondays focus on exploring new opportunities, applying for funding and making sure each study is the right fit for the Trust and our patients. Behind the scenes, Catherine Hart, our Assistant Director, is busy looking over our team finances and identifying funding opportunities.
Meanwhile, Tracy creates a flyer for an upcoming public and patient involvement group. We work closely with the public to make sure our research proposals reflect real community needs. At the same time, our Research Operations Manager, Sedaf, and support managers, Lydia and Steve, meet to discuss expressions of interest for new study opportunities. By Monday, the ideas are set in motion. Tomorrow, the systems and teams behind them take shape.
Once a study is approved, it's time to build the team, the processes and the systems behind it. Database setup, eligibility screening, first contact with participants, all the gears start turning. Staff complete study-specific training to make sure everything is delivered safely and effectively. This year, we trained 44 staff in new interventions, more than double the 21 trained last year.
Databases are set up to securely and confidentially manage participant details and track recruitment. Gavin, our project assistant, handles this important task. Once the database is made, we input information about potential participants who have been screened and identified as suitable to be included in the study.
We reach out to those who are eligible to see if they might be interested and send out study packs with all the information they need. We can do this via email or by post to suit whatever they prefer.
Our team regularly meet with principal investigators and sponsors to make sure that the study is getting off the ground and that things are running smoothly. All the while, our senior admin assistant Alison keeps things moving, writing newsletters, arranging meetings and making calls. On Tuesday, the groundwork is laid. By Wednesday, research is ready to take out into the community.
It's the people who make the research possible: clinicians, participants, research champions and communities. This year we worked hard to reach more people. Midweek, Tim heads out into the community, talking to the public about research and how they can get involved. Karen visits the Waterloo Centre to put up posters and sit in on community clinics. She makes sure that research is an option that's available to everyone.
We use social media to share opportunities and celebrate our successes, reaching more people than ever before. Sometimes we get exciting opportunities to share our research in new ways. Recently, we appeared on BBC Radio Humberside to promote the Interact 2 loneliness study. Take a listen.
Well, now our local NHS has teamed up with a London university to look at ways to tackle loneliness and isolation.
We also want to support staff to develop their own careers in research. Clinicians like Jess, a clinical psychologist in older people's mental health, help us connect with patients and support them to engage with research. The Memory Assessment Service has played a vital role in dementia research recruitment. They have embedded research into routine care. Whenever a patient receives a diagnosis, they're asked if they'd like to be involved. Jo, one of our specialist nurses, signposts interested patients to us.
Currently we have 61 research champions across our trust who work hard to spread the word about new studies. Catherine travels to the Malton Community Hospital to visit research champion Louise Shelley, one of our speech and language therapists, who has recently been awarded a funded NIHR clinical fellowship.
Supporting current staff is vital, but so is connecting with the future healthcare professionals who will carry research forward. John and Libby present to the newest cohort of resident doctors about how they can build research into their practice. Later, John and Karen speak to T-level students at White College about how they might incorporate research into their future careers.
By the end of Wednesday, we've built the connections. Now it's time to see how research comes to life in practice. Research can happen anywhere. Our team work hard to make sure it's centred on care, adaptable and flexible. In primary care, Clive, a research nurse, delivers interventions and collects valuable data alongside practice staff like Danielle, a healthcare assistant.
Our research activities go beyond clinics, reaching participants in the comfort of their own homes. During these visits, we learn about the people in our communities and build trusting relationships. This improves people's understanding of research and often sparks an interest to get more involved with other studies. We guide participants through surveys, overcoming barriers where possible, making sure that every voice is heard. Here, Ruby provides an accessible paper version of an online survey.
On the other hand, our Finch study took us to the great outdoors, allowing children to experience forest schooling with the hopes of boosting their health and well-being.
Back at HQ, our admin processes keep studies safe and compliant with good clinical practice guidelines to meet quality standards. As the week is coming to a close and our studies are ticking along, it's time to reflect on their impact.
It's not just about the numbers, it's about the impact we have on people, staff and services. Every response and every reflection helps shape better care.
We've maintained close relationships with the academic teams we work with and are proud to be collaborating with the new University of Hull Centre for Addiction and Mental Health Research. We even went down to Imperial College London this year to pay Austin, the lead on Interact2 loneliness study, a visit.
To maintain our high standards, we continuously review feedback from participants and stakeholders, learning what's working and what can be improved. This year we sat down with some of our participants and staff on camera to hear about their experiences. Here's what a few of them had to say.
I really enjoyed learning new things. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I wanted to learn more.
I am curious and also thought it to be an opportunity to participate in something of interest.
During my nurse training, I did a placement with the research team. It completely changed how I viewed research and how I understood it.
Research lets you be part of something that's aiding the development of our knowledge and understanding of lots of different areas of health and well-being.
I qualified as an intensive care nurse. I had to stop doing the job. It felt like it was the end of my world. I discovered that there was different ways I could help people by helping in research.
I feel that I'm helping in a witty little way.
Really positive.
varied.
It's so much easier than I ever thought it was going to be.
The team were really friendly, really welcoming.
I enjoyed the people coming to the house. They cheered me up.
At first I thought a bit scary, but really interesting.
And I've been participants in studies, we've surveyed, interviewed, part of a focus group, which has been really enjoyable.
I got to see the whole process during the placement, which really expanded my learning.
I learned more about myself and it gave me like a sense of motivation that I can actually reverse my diabetes.
I found that patients mainly have a positive experience when taking part in a study. The thing I love the most about it, I'm sharing my story and my experiences. Showed me that my experiences are valuable.
I'm more capable about research than I thought I would be, and that it is accessible to absolutely everybody.
So my brain is better at some things than others, and her age has impacted me more than I had anticipated.
My memory's not as good as I thought it was. It really, in a way, frightened me, but not in a scary way, just to think, start reading a bit more, being a bit more active brain-wise.
Taught me that I don't need to be in the front line of medicine to make a difference. I can help people by doing something really simple, like doing a questionnaire for 10 minutes.
It built on my confidence. I definitely couldn't have ever imagined presenting a presentation at a conference or running a focus group.
Research can involve a lot of juggling. It has made me aware how well I prioritise and manage my time.
It did inspire me to go on to do my masters, and I think that's really important that as nurses that we have those opportunities to do the research that shapes our practice and shapes the lives of our patients and families and colleagues.
Research is fundamental, really.
Research underpins absolutely everything.
It gives you a different perspective.
It's not about me particularly, but our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. There's going to be so many different things that are open to them.
Research helps to shape a better future.
Not only does it help us develop our knowledge in lots of different areas, it also informs the development and growth of the services.
You have to move with the times, don't you?
Anything that can help to reduce disease is worth the effort.
We use it all the time, research, in anything and everything.
When you have a life-limiting condition, you assume that every day is going to be the same and that there's never going to be any hope of getting better. Research opens the doors that we thought could never be opened.
Each year ends with our annual Research and Development Conference, a chance to reflect and celebrate.
Last year, we heard from several Trust colleagues who were authors on academic publications, including clinical psychologist Hannah Armitt. Since then, Hannah's co-production project has been awarded the Wendy Mitchell Patient and Carer Experience Award.
This time around, we wanted our conference video to feel more personal, to showcase the people behind the research. We took on the challenge of filming and editing it ourselves, and we hope you enjoyed it.
To everyone who took part, supported research or helped to make it possible, thank you. Working together we can continue to improve healthcare services for our local communities.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everybody that was involved in that. There's a lot of faces in the room today that were filmed and maybe weren't that keen initially, but I think it was really important that we showed a bit of what goes on behind the scenes, because people come to conferences and hear us talking about research, but actually I don't think anybody really understands what goes into it all. And it was great hearing from some of the research participants as well what it meant to them, because we know they tend to have a positive experience, but it was nice to see them talking about that. So does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that. It was quite different to the kind of video that we've done in the past to celebrate our last year. It still gave you some of the kind of performance-y stuff and outcomes, but it hopefully let you get to know some of the research team. I'm going to swap over now because I'm just going to present a couple of slides. Okay, so I'm going to make up a bit of time because this will only take a few minutes and then we'll pass over to Michelle. But I'm actually after your help. A few months ago, we completed as a trust what's called the SORT tool, which is a kind of self-assessment of organisational research readiness. It's a new national tool that a lot of the acute teaching hospitals have completed, but not so many of the mental health and community trusts. So we went through this exercise and we actually identified some areas that we thought we could really improve on. And my colleague, Hayley Jackson, who's somewhere, oh, she's over there, came up with a quality improvement project. So we sit in the medical directorate and quality improvement is really important to us. So as well as being a research department, we want to do quality improvement as well. So we thought, well, why can't we as a research department do quality improvement? How can we improve what we do in research and how we engage people? So we came together and we've designed a quality improvement project. There is a poster over there actually. But now we need your help. Now our research superheroes need your help because Rachel and Louisa in our team have helped us create superhero characters for each of us. We just thought it was a bit fun and it's all over social media apparently. So we now need your help. There are some suggestion boxes on the table and you've all got post-it notes. And this is the reason why. We want to know how you think we can empower those working in our clinical services to be more aware and involved in research. So maybe if there's clinicians amongst you, maybe you could think about, right, okay, so I've heard all about the great research that's going on. How can I get more involved? How can we empower you? What are maybe the obstacles to you getting involved? So if you can pop any ideas in the suggestions box throughout the day, but certainly if you can each pop one in before you go for your lunch, that would be great. And then also, how can we ensure more people that access our services can have more opportunities to take part in research? So maybe some of you are volunteers, maybe we're all patients, aren't we? Maybe you can think about, okay, well, how would I like to get to know more about research? How can we as a trust engage you more in research? So any ideas you have, this will really help us with our quality improvement project to get more research going in the trust and to make sure that every single person that accesses our clinical services gets the chance to take part and to hear about research. If you're online watching, if you could just pop any comments, suggestions that you have, just pop it in the Q&A. We'll have all of that at the end of the conference and we're going to look at all of these comments and see how we could change things in our trust and do things better. It will also help inform our future research plans and strategies over the next year or two as well. So any comments, even comments that are outside of this, we're happy to hear anything that you think would be really great for us to know about or how we can improve, do things better. So yeah, if each one of you can just commit to putting at least one comment in the box, that would be wonderful, as well as filling in the Interact loneliness survey as well. That would be great. Okay. Does anybody have any questions from that? No, wonderful. I'm going to hand over to Michelle now. Michelle was going to open the conference for us, but unfortunately wasn't able. But I'm delighted that she's here and would like to say a few words. So thank you, Michelle. Yeah, that's it. Is that all right? No, I think we need to swap because of the streaming. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you. Sincere apologies, I actually didn't make the opening, but I'm sure alongside a few other people, the traffic was quite horrendous, what with the weather and everything else. So, but I did want to just to say a few words. First of all, thank you to all the speakers this morning. I've listened to the majority of them. I've been in and out of meetings as well, but got the bulk of them. And what's really great is to see that connection between the clinicians and the academic research coming coming together, because I think that is so important. And just to hear the conversations at the break is vital. And these conferences go from strength to strength. And I know we've got over 100 participants online, and obviously a lot of people in the room. And I can't believe it's our 8th research conference. And we started off in smaller rooms, and every year we've just got bigger and bigger and bigger, which is fantastic. And it's a testament to Catherine and the team. And I thought that week was really good. And we're going to have to share that around the organisation, I think. And certainly the board and governors will be interested to see it. But just the theme I've got from this morning is that interconnectivity, not just between the clinician and the research, but with the service user and families and carers. And I think that's absolutely central. As a clinician by background, what we do is about patients and families and their care and making a difference to them and the communities, be it the wider communities, when we've had a look at ethnicity and diversity as well. And that real interrelationship. And as you know, most people know that I chaired the Clinical Research Network for a lot of years, because I'm really of the mind that research is everybody's business. Sometimes it gets put in a little bit of a bucket over there that it's somebody else's responsibility, or it's too difficult for me to do. Well, it's everybody's. Everybody is a researcher, and you know, as Catherine said, we are the patients of the future, so we do need research as well. So it is a great pleasure to be here. The afternoon looks fantastic as well, and I'll be around for this afternoon. But you want to know how to eat, don't you? And I don't know how to do that, but it smells fantastic, doesn't it? I would remind you a little bit about the barcodes and everything, and the stands out there are fantastic. There's lots of goodies on them as well. Pens, pads, sweets, which we all like, so please help yourself to those. But also any comments and feedback as well. I know we'll pick this up at the end, and I don't want to do the closing piece, but I just wanted to say I have been around. It's really great to see everybody. Thanks for everybody online as well, and please do join us this afternoon. Thanks for your time, but first of all, thank you to the speakers as well. I think we've got some caterers that need to explain what's happening on the food setup. Those of you at home, please do make sure you have something nice to eat and restore your energy and your fluid levels. And I think we're back at 10 to 2-ish, so that, because Kwame is going to, Dr. Fofi, our medical director, is going to chair this afternoon. If you're back a little bit earlier, that'd be good.